People grow at different rates. It is just how things go, and some people get strong fast, making a name for themselves and getting all the praise from the king. But other people take their time and end up getting mocked for being useless when they can't keep up. The truth is, it doesn't actually work like that, because there are people who grow slow but have crazy hidden talent just waiting to come out. Sometimes that power just stays dormant for a bit, needing a little push to show up. The ones who help those people finally reach their potential are trainers, and this guy is standing with his team over a massive fallen monster. A girl shouts that they finally hit the max level. The big knight is losing it because he can't believe it's real, while the girl with glasses is still in shock. The blonde girl looks at her progress and says she's actually feeling pretty emotional about how far they've come. The red-haired girl starts laughing and bragging about their progress, saying they might be the fastest humans to ever get this strong, and she keeps making a big deal out of their achievement, right as Arrows chimes in from the side to congratulate the whole group. Arrows is actually blushing because he's so proud, telling the team he never expected them to hit this level so fast. He thinks they're amazing. He keeps cheering for them, but while he's all hyped up, the rest of the party just stands there looking completely bored and over it. The red-haired girl gives him this smug look and says he's right, congratulating him back while he just smiles along, not realizing the vibe is shifting. She tells him they're exhausted and orders him to haul all their bags to the inn like he always does, and the knight dumps his gear on him too. Arrows doesn't even complain, he just says he's on it and mentions he's already carrying the stuff for the other two girls. But once they're settled in at the city, the mood turns cold. Someone tells Arrows they don't need him anymore and he's officially kicked out. Arrows just stands there looking totally stunned. It's like he can't even process what's happening, and he finally snaps out of it, spinning around to ask what they could possibly mean by telling him he has to leave. The party leader asks Arrows if he gets it yet, but he just yells back that there's no way he could ever understand what she's saying, and she keeps going, explaining that today they finally hit level 50, which is the absolute limit for any adventurer. She tells him straight up that they don't need a trainer anymore if his only job is helping others grow, and then asks if he finally understands, leaving Arrows standing there in total shock, sweating as the reality of the situation starts to sink in. He starts to panic, stammering that while they might not need his training skills, he still has his support magic to help them out, but she cuts him off mid-sentence, spelling it out for him that they are already at the max level and don't need any more help. The leader asks if he seriously thought they'd still need his support magic at this point, and Arrows turns to look at the rest of the group hoping for some backup, but the knight is just laughing at him while the girls look away like they couldn't care less. The leader says she's sorry, but tells him that everyone else in the party agrees with her decision to cut him loose. She leans in with a smug grin, asking if it's clear now that not a single person in the room has any use for him anymore. Dahlia looks him right in the eye and asks if he actually thinks his training stuff matters now that they're really taking on the Demon Lord's army. She keeps it blunt, telling him they just don't need him or his job anymore, while Arrows stands there completely frozen, thinking about the vocation he's relied on since the day he was born. Since vocations are basically special powers that God gives to every person the second they enter the world. Once someone gets one, they can use magic and skills that fit that specific role. And as Arrows thinks back on it, he remembers how his own job is a nurturer, something that's pretty rare for helping people grow, even if he can't fight for real. It's a huge contrast to the rest of the group, which is packed with legends like Dahlia the Sword Saint, Kostoma the Holy Knight, and Glissine the Sage. Not to mention Iris the Saint, meaning every single person in the party besides him has an elite vocation made for high-level combat. Dahlia is the real standout though, a total prodigy who broke every record by becoming a first-class adventurer at the youngest age ever seen. She was even handed the title of hero for everything she's done, which is the whole reason why everyone knows their group as the Heroes Party. Arrows stands there looking down, realizing they really are a flawless group now. He admits to himself that they might not even need his support magic anymore, but he isn't ready to give up yet. He calls out to Dahlia and asks if they didn't promise to defeat the Demon Lord together, but she just coldly says she doesn't remember any of that. Desperate to stay, Arrows insists he can protect himself and keep providing support for the team. He even offers to do all the chores or anything else they need, practically begging them to let him stay on any terms. That's when Kostoma steps in, accusing Arrows of just wanting to slack off and reap the rewards while the rest of them do all the actual fighting. The big knight tells him his role is already over and that he's just tagging along for the ride. He claims that once they actually beat the Demon Lord's army, Arrows is just going to act like he's the boss and take all the credit for himself. Arrows can't even believe what he's hearing, but Kostoma doubles down and calls him a despicable guy. Arrows is completely shaken, wondering if this is really how his friends have seen him this whole time. He knows it's true that the other four are the main ones doing the heavy lifting in battle. However, As he looks at their silhouettes, he knows deep down that he's contributed just as much to this party as anyone else has. Arrows stands there surrounded by the dark shapes of his party members, thinking about how they actually got so strong so fast, and it all comes back to the fact that he's a trainer. It's his specific power that made everything possible, mainly because his biggest strength isn't fighting but his support skills. He's got this one move that changes everything, a level 10 support skill that basically breaks the rules. It makes anyone nearby get 5 times the normal amount of divine essence, which is basically the fuel people need to level up their jobs. The gods hand it out whenever someone take down a magic beast, so as long as the group is fighting near arrows, they're growing 5 times faster than any normal adventurer ever could. Because of this, Dahlia and the rest of the crew managed to hit their absolute max level in only 3 years. They look like a top-tier team, but Arrows doesn't think he's the only one who deserves the credit. To him, this wasn't just about his special skills, since he truly felt like they were a team of comrades who earned their success together while traveling and camping out. But even though he feels that way, Dahlia just sits there looking completely cold and over it, like none of that history matters at all. Kostoma just stands there with a big grin on his face. But the truth is Arrows realized he was the only one who actually cared about their bond, while Iris and Glycine look like they couldn't care less. Arrows finally gives in and says he'll just leave, which makes Kostoma laugh while saying he's glad the guy is finally being smart about it. Dahlia leans in with a smug look, asking if he's really not gonna come crying to her for another chance, but Arrows tells her straight up that he won't do that, even though deep down he's actually pretty torn up about it. He stays quiet, thinking about the real reason he wanted to stay with this party so bad, and it all goes back to the Demon Lord's army. They've got these massive forces, starting with the Dragon King's group, which is basically part of a nightmare led by 5 legendary monsters. You've got the Forest King and the Spirit King leading their own packs, plus the Rock King and Sea King armies that round out the whole list of world-ending threats. Taking down these 5 massive armies is the one thing every single adventurer is working toward. Arrow stands there thinking about his one true goal, the thing that's been driving him this whole time, and it's to finally take down the Dragon King Doran. He wants to wipe out that whole army for killing his parents, but he's realizing now that he actually thought he could pull it off with this party, and now Dahlia cuts through his thoughts to tell him to leave all his gear and items behind. Kostoma backs her up, saying everything he has is officially their property now. Arrows just stands there looking completely shocked by how cold they are. He starts taking off his gear and says he'll leave it, but he mentions that since he did his job as their trainer, he at least expected some kind of reward, which is when he turns to leave. He stops for a second and says he's going to give them one last piece of advice, making Kostoma look pretty confused. So Arrows warns them that they're probably planning to head into the Demon Lord's territory next, but they really need to hold off for a bit because he tells them straight up that even though they're strong, their levels rose way too fast, and their actual combat experience isn't where it needs to be yet. Dahlia just starts laughing her head off, mockingly asking if the great trainer really thinks he knows everything about how much they've grown. Dahlia shuts him down immediately, saying they don't need his worry since they've already decided to invade the Forest King's territory. She even mocks him, telling him that if that was his big parting shot, he really should have come up with something better. The door slams shut as Arrows walks away, leaving the sounds of their laughter behind him in the room. Standing out in the hallway alone, he just lets out this massive sigh, trying to process everything that just happened, and starts thinking that maybe he was just being a busybody since Dahlia's crew actually is strong. But then he realizes the person he's really worried about is actually himself. He completely loses it for a second, clutching his head and yelling about how much this situation sucks. Once he calms down, he realizes this isn't even the first time he's been kicked out of a party. It's actually happened a bunch of times right after he helped his teammates level up. Back then, everyone treated him like he was useless because the only thing he could contribute was his cheering skills, leading to his old teammates constantly asking if he was just there taking up space. Getting kicked out so many times really got to Arrows, so he hit the books and trained like crazy to actually be useful in a fight. That was right when Dahlia first showed up and found him, asking if he was the legendary cultivator since he had such a rare job. She reached out and straight up asked him to join her party and lend them his power. In exchange, she promised she'd help him take down the Dragon King's army, the guys who ruined his life. It worked out. At first Kostoma was losing his mind over how fast his level was jumping, and Dahlia just acted like she knew he was amazing all along. She kept bragging about how great her scouting was as the party's levels hit insane heights, but back in the present, Arrows is starting to see the truth. He remembers her cold voice telling him they don't need any dead weight, and it finally clicks. He starts wondering if he just got way too full of himself because his support skills were so good, realizing that while he was helping everyone else, he wasn't even trying to get stronger himself. The thought hits him hard: if Dahlia and the rest of the crew saw right through his weakness, It makes sense why they dumped him. Eros clenches his fist tight. He's dead set on getting stronger and finally being useful to the people around him, so he decides right then to head to the guild to start training. But as he's running down the hall, he suddenly stops dead. He starts frantically checking all his pockets, realizing in a panic that his adventurer's handbook is completely gone. He remembers Dahlia telling him to leave his gear behind when they kicked him out, and the memory of that moment just makes him break into a cold sweat. It hits him that he literally can't take a single guild quest without that book, and the thought of having to get it reissued sounds like such a massive hassle that he realizes there's only one choice left, which is heading back to find the others, even if he looks totally exhausted just thinking about it. He walks back, telling himself that even though it's super awkward, at least he's calmed down enough to handle it now. Eros thinks back to the parting shot he was given earlier and decides he'll just go ahead and apologize for that too, but standing right outside the door, he's still a nervous wreck, wondering how his weak argument even worked on the guy in the first place. Eros overhears the group talking, and someone mentions that he wasn't actually as useless as they made him out to be. And Kostoma admits he almost lost it laughing when Dahlia started that forced persuasion, which just leaves Eros standing there totally confused. Dahlia tells everyone to be quiet, saying that acting like that was the only way to get her to leave so they could move forward, which makes Eros realize the excuse they gave him earlier was a total lie, and he admits to himself that the whole thing felt off. He starts wondering if there was another reason for everything, maybe some unavoidable stuff they couldn't talk about, leading Kostoma to explain that the fight with the Skin King's army is just too risky for Eros, while Iris agrees that cutting him loose was for the best. Iris asks the group if they couldn't have just worked Eros a little harder instead of getting rid of him, but Dahlia shuts that idea down immediately, telling Iris they're about to start their real offensive, all while Eros listens from the door in total shock. Glycine backs her up while she eats, saying that if Eros sticks around for the mission, their final payout is going to be way smaller. And Eros just stands there frozen, realizing the whole reason they dumped him was because he was shrinking their paycheck. Dahlia keeps going with her explanation, saying that with Eros around, there is a big problem because no matter what they achieve from here on out, there's always a chance he might end up taking all the credit. Iris asks the group if that would totally piss them off, and Kostoma agrees that it would definitely get under his skin. Dahlia finishes her tea and says she wouldn't be able to stand that either, making it clear where she stands. Eros stands outside the door in total shock, repeating the part about stealing their credit to himself as he realizes it's true. As the guy who raised these heroes, his own reputation grows every time they do something big, and it turns out they just hate the idea of people saying their success is all thanks to their trainer instead of them. The truth finally hits him hard, and he realizes that this was the real reason they wanted him gone all along. Glycine speaks up, asking if they shouldn't have at least given him some severance pay as a thank you for helping them grow. Dahlia just brushes it off, telling Glycine she's way too sweet, just like the milk tea they're drinking right now. Dahlia keeps talking inside, saying that giving him anything would just prove how much he actually did for them, and Kostoma chimes in that just firing him and kicking him to the curb is the best move they could make. Dahlia totally agrees, so Eros stands there in a daze, repeating the words, the right way to use a trainer, over and over in his head. His eyes go wide as the weight of their words finally breaks him. He turns and sprints down the hallway, just trying to get away, realizing the whole time that he wasn't kicked out because he was weak or some kind of burden to the party. It was actually the opposite. They just wanted to keep all the money for themselves and make sure he didn't get any credit. He bursts out of the building and onto the busy street, making people stop and wonder what the hell is wrong with him. But he doesn't care, just walking through the crowd while thinking about how they used him until they were done. He tells himself it's true. His only real purpose was helping everyone else grow while he got left behind with nothing. Eros keeps running as he realizes he can't stop the Dragon King's army alone, but joining another party is out because they'll just use him and kick him to the curb again. He stops in the middle of the sidewalk and shouts that it's all completely useless, screaming at the top of his lungs about what a trainer is even supposed to be. He looks down at the street and apologizes to his parents, saying he wanted to get revenge for them, but it's becoming clear that he just doesn't have what it takes to do it by himself. He walks through the crowd, thinking about how there are plenty of actually strong people out there, feeling sure that someone else will eventually step up and handle the Dragon King's army. Eros tells himself that it's totally fine to walk away and that he's okay with it. With his back to everything, he starts wondering what he's even going to do now. Eros stands there by himself, just staring off and wondering what he's even supposed to do with his life now. 2 months go by and he finds himself looking out over a valley, finally spotting something familiar in the distance. He's actually made it back to the town where he was born, and it's a weird feeling to see it again after so long. Eros walks through the busy streets with a tired smile, just blending into the crowd as he heads inside. Everything brings back a ton of memories, which makes sense considering he hasn't stepped foot in this place for 6 whole years. He passes by some young girls who clearly just started out as adventurers. They're all excited and ready to go. The place is still packed with rookies just like it used to be, and he silently hopes they don't end up like him. This is his hometown, Humas. Most people around these parts just call it the town of beginnings. It's way out of the demon lord's reach and surrounded by weak stuff, so there are always easy monster hunting jobs available. That's exactly why the town is so famous for attracting new adventurers who are just looking for a safe way to start. Since so many merchants and weaponsmiths hang out here, a guy can find pretty much anything he needs, making it the perfect spot for travelers, especially since the local food and drinks are supposed to be amazing. Arrows originally just came back to visit his parents' graves and check on his old house, but seeing the town now, he thinks it wouldn't be so bad to just stay here and relax for the rest of his life. He decides to head toward the Adventurers Guild, but suddenly stops when a girl behind him calls out his name. He turns around to find a girl smiling at him, saying she knew she recognized him from somewhere. She teases him a bit, asking if he actually forgot who she was after all this time, and he realizes it's Tara. She laughs and says he's spot on, mentioning how long it's been since they last met. Arrows takes a look at her clothes and asks if she's still working as a receptionist at the town guild. Tara just smiles and says she is, mostly because she's gotten so used to living in this town over the years. Arrows thinks about Tara Brune. She's a receptionist at the guild who really looked out for him back when he was just a rookie starting his journey, so seeing her again is a trip. But she just puts a finger to her lips and says she's already heard the news about him. She leans in close and asks if it's true that he joined Hero Dahlia's party and is doing amazing things now. Arrows just stands there looking completely shocked that she knows, and Tara just beams with pride, telling him she knew it from the start and always believed he could make it big. Arrows starts sweating and tries to tell her it's not what she thinks, but she's already putting the pieces together in her head. Tara starts looking around the street all excited, asking if the hero's party is actually here in town right now, while Arrows just stays quiet and looks incredibly awkward. He tries to find the right words, nervously waving his hand and telling her that the situation isn't quite what she's imagining, because he finally just comes out with it and tells her he got kicked out of the hero's party, leaving her standing there totally confused. Tara's eyes go wide and she looks totally frozen, just trying to process the news. Arrows looks away and explains that they told him his role was over and he'd only be a hindrance from then on, while Tara just stares at him in total silence. Tara looks down, looking pretty bummed out as she realizes Arrows got kicked out of yet another party. Arrows looks surprised and asks if she actually remembers all the stuff that happened in the past, and Tara tells him of course she does, since she was the one who watched him struggle the most back then. The word trainer flashes through his mind, bringing back some really rough memories of a big adventurer kicking him onto the floor, yelling that he needs to get strong himself before trying to teach others. Young Tara had rushed over to ask if he was okay while he sat there in tears, just saying he wanted to be stronger. He kept crying, saying that if he didn't get better, nobody would ever want him in their party, and back in the present, Tara explains she really thought he'd be fine once he joined up with Dahlia, but she snaps out of it and gets excited, figuring he came back to town to scout for new members. She winks and gives him a big thumbs up, telling him to leave it all to her because she's going to help him out. Arrows drops a bombshell, telling her he doesn't plan on joining any more parties, which leaves Tara completely shocked as she asks if he's really going solo now. He just rubs his head and looks away awkwardly. Tara starts to get it, saying it makes sense he wouldn't want a new team after getting kicked out. Even so, she looks him in the eye and says he'd still be a huge help to any group he joins. She brings up his old goal of taking down the Dragon King, but Arrows just brushes it off. He says he's just going to leave that stuff to other adventurers from now on, surprising her again. He explains there's no reason for him to do it anymore and he doesn't want to go through that pain again. Tara doesn't push it, but she tells him to let her know if he ever changes his mind about it. She's still ready to help, promising to put a massive notice on the board for him, so Arrows smiles and says he'll definitely come find her if things ever end up changing. Arrows stops for a second and tells Tara he actually has one more request to make. She completely loses it when he says he wants to re-register with the guild under a totally different name. Tara is still in shock, but Arrows just calmly explains that since he lost his handbook and needs a new one anyway, he might as well just start over fresh. Tara warns him that it's possible, but his rank is going to drop all the way back to level 5, which means he won't be able to take any good quests. Arrows doesn't seem to care and says he's got enough money saved up for now, and he isn't planning on doing anything too crazy or difficult, because he really just wants to make sure nobody realizes he's the same Arrows that was part of the hero's team. He knows Dahlia is probably going to start talking trash soon, telling everyone that Arrows' Fleur was just too weak to handle the real fights. It turns out the rumors are already starting, with people all over the place talking about how someone finally got kicked out of the hero's party. Some guys at a bar are even laughing about it, saying they bet the guy was probably crying and begging the hero not to throw him out. Another person remembers him, mentioning that he was that guy with the really weird job title. The people in the tavern keep talking trash, saying they always thought that guy was sketchy anyway. Arrows knows that even though he stayed in the background, being part of the heroes group makes him big news, so Tara agrees to help him out. She gets fired up and says they should just take care of it right now, dragging him along before he can even react. Arrows tries to slow her down, asking if she's even allowed to do this since she's supposed to be on her break. Tara doesn't care at all and tells him it's fine because she can get the whole thing finished in a flash. While they walk, she gets to the point and asks if he's actually picked out a new name for himself yet. He decides to keep it simple and says he'll just go by Rose, which Tara thinks is a pretty random choice. But she gets the paperwork done quickly and hands over his new card, telling him thanks for waiting while he thanks her for the help. She gives him a friendly wink and tells the new rookie adventurer Rose to have some good luck out there. As he starts to head out, she yells after him that they need to grab food soon, leaving Rose to start his fresh journey. Rose stands in the middle of town with his hands on his hips. He's officially starting over today as a rookie adventurer under his new name. He makes his way through the streets until he finally stops in front of an old, familiar building. It's his house. Looking at the overgrown yard, he realizes he's actually back, or more like he just ended up back where he started. It really starts to sink in that he's been kicked out of the hero's party as he unlocks the door and steps inside, quietly saying he's home. The place is a mess, reminding him of how he promised himself he'd only come back after defeating the Dragon King. But as he looks around at the thick layers of dust everywhere, he wonders if he even meant that. He starts coughing from all the dust in the air and decides that whatever he used to think doesn't even matter anymore. He takes a second to sit down in his old rocking chair and lets out a long sigh. It feels pretty nostalgic to be back in his own seat. The relaxation doesn't last long though, since he realizes the very first thing on his to-do list has to be cleaning. He starts planning it all out, figuring he needs to check the furniture and get to weeding the garden soon. Arrows looks at the mess and realizes there's a ton of work ahead of him, and he's already feeling pretty wiped out. But as he relaxes in his chair, he decides he's done with the hero life and will just leave the Dragon King to his old party. A whole month goes by while he gets settled into his new routine, and now he's out in the fields, looking around the base of the mountains for a specific target. He spots them pretty quickly, 2 flying boars just like the ones mentioned in the quest he picked up. Seeing how aggressive they are, he totally gets why the local ladies were having such a rough time. So he draws his sword and tells himself it's time to get to work, snapping his fingers to get ready. The boars charge right at him, but he just calmly triggers his muscle and agility enhancements, moving so fast he's basically a blur as he slices right through both of them in a single pass. He finishes the move with a clean follow-through, making the whole fight look like it was absolutely nothing. Arrows finishes off the first target, casually noting that he's got one down and thinks about how easy it is to handle weak beasts, deciding to just take an ear as proof of the kill. Moving on, he starts heading back, feeling like he's finally living a really fulfilling life. He makes it back to the guild and waves hello to Tara, who greets him as Rose, letting her know the job is done, while she tells him he did a good job on the request. Since he's on a roll, he asks if there are any more jobs he can pick up for the day, but Tara asks if he'd rather just take a promotion exam instead, which he immediately turns down. She gets a bit serious, telling him she really thinks his strength could help a lot more people, and while he says he appreciates the thought, he's clearly not interested in going back to that life. He makes a quick exit, shouting that he'll be back tomorrow as Tara realizes he just ran away. Arrows tells Tara he gets what she's trying to say, but he's not interested explaining that he's actually started to really like the way he's living his life now. Thinking back, he remembers how insane things were when he was still with the hero's party. He'd be running around buying antidotes for everyone or cooking over a campfire while exhausted. Between the constant fighting and doing every single chore, he never had a second to rest, and while he mentions he saved up a lot of cash, the stress just wasn't worth it. Now he just breezes through simple requests like the one he finished today, spending his time shopping at the market and laughing with the shopkeepers. After that, he'll just go home to cook a nice meal or read a book, just taking it easy and living a totally relaxed, slow life. Arrows sits inside his quiet house at night, thinking to himself that things are finally going great, staring at his cup, and realizing this peaceful life is exactly what he's been looking for. He leans back with a huge smile, feeling completely free and not tied down by anyone anymore, really soaking in the fact that he's finally living life on his own terms. He lets out a big stretch, doubling down on the idea that he's only going to live for himself from now on. But right then, a loud knock at the door ruins his vibe, making him wonder who's showing up so late. He calls out that he's coming and walks over to the front of the house, where he opens the door to find a young girl in light armor standing there looking pretty nervous. Eros is totally caught off guard and asks her who she is, while the girl just stands there stammering until she finally finds her voice and asks if he's actually Rose, the famous trainer. Eros just stands there with his eyes wide open, completely floored, wondering how this random kid even knows who he is. He hasn't told a soul, and he definitely hasn't called himself a trainer once since he got back to town, so the only person he can think of who would talk is Tara, but he doubts she'd just blab his secrets. The girl looks at him nervously and asks if he's really Rose, but Eros has a bad feeling that if he says yes, his peaceful life is over. He scratches his head and asks if she's sure she has the right guy, which leaves him sweating bullets while he tries to play it off and keep his cover. The girl looks absolutely crushed by his answer, like her whole world just fell apart. She starts bowing like crazy, apologizing for making a huge mistake, and Eros feels terrible because she's so honest. Eros looks totally stressed out and tries to start an explanation, telling the kid she's wrong, but he caves almost immediately, admitting that he actually is Rose after all. He clarifies that he never once called himself a trainer, which leaves the girl looking completely lost. He gives up on the act and just asks her who gave her his name in the first place. The girl stammers a bit, saying she heard it from a really nice lady at the guild reception desk. Eros realizes it was Tara who sold him out, and he looks pretty annoyed while the girl tries to keep talking. She mentions how she heard a real trainer was living right here, and that this guy was a total expert at helping adventurers reach their full potential. She looks at him with huge eyes and asks if he'll make her stronger, which catches him completely off guard. He realizes he messed up by asking questions because now he's stuck in this conversation. The red-haired girl puts on a brave face and mentions how her growth is way slower than other people, explaining that even though she's been an adventurer for a whole year, she's still stuck at level 3. She admits she even got kicked out of her last party, which leaves Eros looking completely shocked. She looks pretty depressed and says no other party will even let her join them anymore. Eros feels bad and apologizes for asking such a heavy question so casually, but the girl starts panicking and apologizing back, feeling terrible for rambling about her problems to a stranger. She looks down at the ground and says she's just useless no matter what she tries, then gives a deep bow and says she's sorry for disturbing him so late at night. She takes off running into the dark, leaving Eros standing in his doorway just thinking about her situation. He realizes that staying at level 3 for a whole year is actually crazy slow. Eros stays stuck on the girl's situation, thinking about how a normal adventurer should hit at least level 10 after a year, but since she doesn't look like a slacker, he figures she's probably just training the wrong way. He looks at his hands and starts thinking that with his specific set of skills, he could actually train her enough to get her into a decent party, but then he catches himself and scratches his head, wondering what he's even thinking getting involved again. He lets out a long sigh, reminding himself that he's already dealt with enough trauma from training people, leaving him walking away from the door, even though he's pretty sure this girl wouldn't turn out like Dahlia. He keeps walking around his place, thinking about how honest and earnest the kid seemed, and as he flops down into his chair, he keeps repeating to himself that she really is a hard worker. He stares out the window, trying to convince himself that if she just keeps at it, her level will eventually go up on its own. Eros sits there looking completely drained, thinking about how he ended up lying to that girl and turning her away, but even though he feels pretty bad about the whole thing, his mind keeps drifting back to how this is all Tara's fault for opening her mouth, and he can't stop worrying about whether the girl's level will ever actually go up, making him clutch his head in frustration, wondering why he has to be the one feeling so guilty and stressed out about it. He decides right then that he's going to the guild first thing tomorrow to give Tara a piece of his mind so this kind of mess never happens again. The next morning comes and he shows up at the Adventurers Guild, only to find out that Tara is actually off duty today, so he sighs and heads out to the forest west of town. Figured since he was already there he might as well take on a simple subjugation quest. He walks through the trees still annoyed, complaining to himself about why Tara had to tell people he was a trainer in the first place, when he hears someone yelling out in the middle of a fight nearby, which pulls him out of his own head. He stops and looks around, wondering if there's another adventurer out here fighting something. Then he realizes that voice actually sounds really familiar. Eros stays hidden behind the bushes and reacts with total surprise as the red-haired girl from yesterday suddenly runs right past him. He can't believe it's actually her. But there she is, standing in the middle of the path and breathing heavy while facing down a large deer with flaming antlers. Eros realizes her opponent is a fire deer, which just happens to be the same target he was planning to hunt for his own quest, and at first, he wonders if they just happened to pick the same job, but then he catches himself because something about this feels completely wrong. He remembers she's only level 3, meaning there's no way the guild would have let her take a quest this dangerous at such a low level. It hits him that she must be out here trying to get stronger on her own since he turned her away, and he watches her from the shadows, realizing she's desperately trying to grind levels. She grits her teeth and charges straight at the beast with her sword ready. Arrows knows that while fire deer aren't exactly the toughest monsters out there for someone with experience, that's definitely not the case for a novice, and he watches as she takes a big swing only for the deer to dodge it like it was nothing. The deer lets out a burst of heat and moves with insane speed, leaving the girl struggling to keep up with a threat she's clearly not ready for. The fire deer breathes a massive wave of flames right at her, and the red-haired girl screams about how hot it is while Arrows watches, thinking there's no way a level 3 should be dealing with this, leading the beast to lunge forward with a sudden burst of speed, forcing the girl to jump back with a terrified shriek as the flaming antlers nearly catch her. Arrows stays hidden and notices that the monster isn't even trying yet. It's just toying with her like she's a toy, which makes the whole situation even worse for him as he starts to panic because what she's doing is beyond reckless, and he knows that if this keeps up, she's going to end up dead. As he wonders why anyone would risk their life like this just to get some extra levels, the girl gathers her courage and lets out a loud shout, charging back in and putting everything into a big swing. But the deer is just too fast and slips away from her blade like it's nothing, leaving her wide open. She doesn't give up though, and her eyes sharpen as she focuses entirely on the deer's next move. And then she actually reads the monster's pattern and swings her sword down, catching the deer off guard and nicking it as she says she saw that coming. Panting and covered in sweat, she lets out a small laugh because she finally landed a hit, but Arrow senses that something isn't right at all, and she stops mid-thought and just stares in total shock as she realizes her small victory didn't actually change the flow of the battle. Landing that little hit backfires because it just makes the deer angry, and it slams a hoof right into her, knocking the wind out of her as she groans in pain, feeling the full force of that hit. The beast isn't done and circles around with blinding speed, leaving her stuck on the ground and forcing Arrows to realize this thing is way too dangerous for her. He starts reaching for his sword. Even though she's coughing and struggling, the red-haired girl refuses to quit and tells herself she's not done, making Arrows freeze up as he watches her pure determination from the bushes, and she keeps pushing herself, saying she has to hurry up and get way stronger no matter what, so she jumps back into the fight, yelling at the monster to get out of her way and just stay still, shouting at the top of her lungs for the deer to just die and give her the experience points she needs. As she charges back in, Arrows can't help but wonder why anyone would go to such crazy lengths just to level up. Watching her struggle makes Arrows go quiet as he looks down, realizing the red-haired girl is terrified that if she doesn't get stronger, no one will ever want her on their team, and seeing that look in her eyes hits home for him. He knows that exact feeling way too well. Determined to prove herself, she pushes through the pain and tells herself she has to get stronger, so she charges back in with her sword out, thinking about how there's a huge reason she can't fail, but right as she makes her move, her eyes go wide when she realizes something is off and her foot catches on a root, making her lose her balance and shout out as she trips, sending her crashing face first into the dirt. Groaning in pain while the deer just stands there watching, the beast doesn't move an inch, just staring her down with those cold eyes before it suddenly moves and close, leaving her pinned to the ground and completely terrified of what's next. The deer looms right over the red-haired girl, breathing heavy steam while she just stares up in total shock, barely able to make a sound as Arrows finally speaks up, telling her she finally noticed what's happening before he triggers a muscle boost to shout at the top of his lungs, stacking on an agility enhancement to push his speed even further, and he takes off like a shot, charging straight toward the monster while kicking up a cloud of dirt. As he leaps past the girl with his dagger drawn, Arrows starts wondering if all the guilt he's been carrying lately was actually just lingering regret. He'd spent so much time worrying if she was really going to be okay on her own. His eyes lock onto the beast with a look of pure focus, and just then the girl looks up at him with wide eyes, starting to realize the truth of why he's actually there. Arrows knows deep down he just wants to help her, and he slams into the ground right in front of the deer with enough force to shake everything. He stands his ground, putting himself right between her and the beast to make sure she's safe. Arrows checks to see if the girl is all right, and she looks up at him totally surprised while thanking him for the help, but then she hesitates, asking him who he actually is as she tries to remember meeting him the day before. Arrows scratches his head and realizes he hasn't been honest, so he gets ready to reintroduce himself properly, reaching out a hand and telling her that he's actually Rose the Nurturer. The girl starts to put the pieces together, asking him if he's really the famous trainer everyone talks about, and Arrows looks her in the eye, saying he needs to start things off with a proper apology because he feels bad about lying to her when they met yesterday. He kneels down to her level, explaining that things have been crazy lately and he didn't want people knowing what his job was, which leaves her just staring at him in shock while he changes the subject to tell her how dangerous her situation just was. Arrows gets serious, telling her that fighting a fire deer alone was a huge mistake because that monster is way out of her league. Rose asks her what she thinks would have happened if he hadn't shown up to help, but then he stops, realizing he might be too harsh. He reminds her that getting stronger doesn't matter if she's dead. The girl looks down and apologizes for being so reckless, but Rose softens his tone and says that he understands she must have a really important reason for wanting power, even if it's dangerous. Hearing someone finally get it makes the girl's eyes start to well up with tears, and she just starts sobbing right there, which totally catches Rose off guard as he tries to figure out what to do, while she struggles to get out the words about her mom being in trouble. She cries out that the only thing she wants is to save her mom, and that's why she's pushing herself so hard. Rose is stunned to hear her mom was cursed by the Spirit King's army, which is a pretty big deal since that army is a top-tier demon force led by the Spirit King Vamp. The red-haired girl explains that about a year ago, her mother was attacked by an officer from the Spirit King's army, and during that attack, her mom was hit with a weakness curse. She looks down as she tells the story, adding that the curse has gotten so bad lately that her mother can barely even stand on her own anymore. Right now, the village chief and some friends are the ones looking after her, but things are looking pretty grim. Rose looks pretty worried hearing this, noting that dealing with a curse like that is going to be a huge pain. The girl clenches her fists in her lap, saying that no matter what they try, medicine and healing magic just don't work, and Rose agrees with her, saying it's basically impossible to treat that kind of curse with normal stuff. He closes his eyes to think about what it would actually take to break her mother's curse, because there are usually very specific conditions you have to meet to make a curse like that disappear, meaning they either have to find and defeat the one who cast it, or find a different solution fast. Rose lays out the reality of the situation, telling the girl they either have to take down an officer from the Spirit King's army or find a specialist to break the curse. And when she asks if he knew that already, he just rubs his head and admits that both of those paths are going to be incredibly difficult to pull off. He knows that a high-ranking officer in that army is going to be way too powerful for a normal fight, making that option almost impossible. So, he brings up the idea of a professional curse breaker instead. But even then, he can see the girl is already starting to look pretty discouraged. She tells him she actually looked into it, and it turns out there is only one person in the entire world with the right job class to use curse-breaking magic, a guy named Lotus. But she gets quiet as she mentions his fee, looking like the cost is way more than she could ever afford. Rose recognizes the name, remembering that this Lotus guy usually only takes jobs from the super rich or the most famous adventurers in the world. Still, he points out that paying a guy is a lot more realistic than trying to kill a demon general, and the girl starts to see his point. A thought hits Rose and he asks if the real reason she's been pushing so hard to get stronger was for this. And she confirms it, saying she thought if she could just get strong enough, she'd finally be able to earn enough money to pay for her mother's cure. The red-haired girl explains the only options are finding a way to remove the curse or joining a group strong enough to take down the Spirit King's army, which she knows is the only way forward. But the reality of how hard that's going to be starts sinking in, since that path is so narrow it's basically non-existent, and the pressure of the situation finally starts to break her down. Rose watches her, thinking about how impossible this whole thing sounds, while the girl just sits there stuttering, unable to find her words. She starts losing it, crying as she asks what she's even supposed to do if there's no way to save her mother, admitting that she's got no talent and can't seem to grow or get any stronger no matter how hard she tries. Rose can't just stand by and watch her suffer like that, so he tells her to stop worrying because he's decided to accept her request, dropping the bombshell that he's actually a trainer and thinks he has what it takes to help her finally reach her potential. The girl is totally caught off guard, asking why he'd tell her that when he was so obsessed with keeping his identity a secret just a few minutes ago, and Rose just sits there, admitting that while he still wants to keep a low profile, he's willing to make an exception for her. Rose looks down, opening up about how his own parents were victims of the Demon Lord's army, explaining that they were actually killed by Dragon King Doran, the leader of the Dragon Army. He admits that he just didn't want her mother to end up as another victim like his parents did, and looking right at her, Rose promises that he truly means every word he's saying. The truth is, he had already decided to help her even before he heard the full story, but the girl starts panicking, worried because she has nothing to give him in return for his help. Rose tells her not to even worry about that, even though he can't quite explain to himself why he's doing this, shrugging it off by saying it's not like he's hurting for money or anything like that. He tells her she can just repay him whenever she feels like it later on, as if this whole thing is just happening naturally. But then he gets serious, saying he can't promise he'll be around until her mother's curse is finally broken. Rose looks the girl in the eye and tells her he really wanted to help her, promising to look after her until she can find a new party to join. She's so relieved that she starts tearing up, letting out a shaky breath before she can even manage to say yes. The girl starts thanking him over and over, telling him how much she appreciates it, and asking him to take care of her from now on, so Rose just shakes her hand and says he's looking forward to it, officially starting their partnership right then and there. But then she gets way too intense, shouting and asking what she's supposed to do first, which catches Rose totally off guard. He tries to calm her down, suggesting they start another day since she has to be exhausted from everything that happened, but she won't hear it, insisting she's perfectly fine and way tougher than she looks. Rose reminds her that the fire deer earlier actually knocked her out cold, but she's got an excuse ready, claiming she was just shocked from being tackled, and that the surprise is the only reason she passed out at all. She stands there looking completely fired up, and Rose can't help but notice just how much energy she really has. Rose looks at the girl and figures her motivation is good enough to start. But there's one small detail. He realizes they haven't even introduced themselves yet, so he asks for her name. The girl completely loses it, realizing she forgot the basics. She snaps to attention and shouts that her name is Rose Vermilion, looking as serious as possible. Rose introduces himself as Rose Fleur, saying it's nice to officially meet her, while she just stands there shaking with excitement. Rose shouts back that it's nice to meet him too, her energy levels reaching an all-time high, and then she gets right in his face, asking what she needs to do first and what the plan is. She's literally bouncing with anticipation, which is starting to make Rose feel a little overwhelmed, so he just stands there for a second, looking at her and trying to process the situation. Rose scratches his head and asks her where they should even start, which catches her off guard, mostly because he's thinking to himself about how he's only ever dealt with mid-level adventurers until this moment. Rose Fleur scratches his head and admits he isn't quite sure where to start training a total rookie like her, mostly because he's never even heard of a job called Apprentice Warrior before in his entire life. This catches Rose off guard, and she asks him how he even knew what her job was when she hadn't mentioned it yet. Rose Fleur gives a nervous apology and explains that his Divine Eye skill lets him see everyone's info automatically, which leaves Rose completely stunned as she tries to wrap her head around him having such a crazy ability. He figures the skill is just meant to make his job easier since he can see exactly what his students need to work on. To be safe, he asks her to officially show him her status screen, and she agrees to do it right away. She starts the process to pull up her info, and a glowing scroll appears, showing every detail about her current strength and her vocation. Even though most people have to use a special chant to see these things, Rose Fleur just thanks her and takes a look. Rose Fleur explains to the girl that his special skill basically lets him see everyone's info automatically. So Rose holds out her scroll and asks if it matches what he saw, which he confirms is exactly the same. She's still reeling from the fact that he can see someone's job and power level at a glance, yelling out in shock, while Rose awkwardly admits he tries not to look too often since it feels like he's peeping on people. He takes a closer look at her official status paper and realizes his eyes definitely weren't playing tricks on him. The stats on the page are actually terrible, showing she's only a level 3 apprentice with F ranks across the board. He knows it's normal for a level 3 to have low stats, but there's something about this that feels way worse, especially because these bottom-tier numbers are the result of her working herself to the bone for a whole year. The blessing that's supposed to boost her physical strength is stuck at the lowest possible rank, and to make matters worse, she hasn't even unlocked any skills or magic from her leveling so far. Rose Fleur looks at her stats and thinks there's no way she's just been slacking off, but Rose Vermilion starts getting shy, telling him it's honestly a bit awkward being stared at this intensely. He calls out her name to get her attention, and she snaps to it immediately, asking what he needs. Rose asks her what she's actually been doing for the past year, which completely catches her off guard. She starts to freak out, asking if she's in trouble and promising him that she's really been trying her hardest. He tells her to relax, explaining he just wants to know what her daily routine was like, making her calm down as she explains she started adventuring at 14, doing low-rank hunts while searching for a team. Money was always an issue though, so she had to spend a lot of time doing odd jobs around the city just to survive. Rose admits that sounds like the life of a typical rookie, but there's still one major thing that doesn't add up. He says it's bizarre she isn't at least level 10 yet, especially since those early levels should be a breeze. Rose looks down, finally admitting that the whole situation really is weird. She looks pretty sad, saying these definitely aren't the stats of someone who's been an adventurer for a year. She's totally defeated, telling Rose that even she can tell she just doesn't have any talent for this life. But Rose just smiles, telling her there's no reason to be so down on herself, which completely surprises her. He stands there in the woods, explaining that while she's definitely different from the norm, it's not a deal breaker. He says it just means her growth is on the slower side, and that's really the only problem here. Rose tells her the solution is simple. They just need to find a way to speed up that growth, and since that's exactly what a trainer's job is, he's got it covered, making Rose gasp as she realizes his plan. Visual only. A huge deer covered in flames suddenly jumps out from the trees, and it looks dangerous. Rose starts to lose it, yelling that it's a flare Bambi fire deer, while Rose just watches the monster move in. Rose watches the monster and decides that this is definitely the fastest way to handle her training. He casually asks Rose if she wants to try taking the beast down herself, which completely catches her off guard, making her scream out and ask what he's even talking about. She's losing it, reminding him that she literally just got her path blocked and beaten by this thing. But Rose doesn't back down, telling her to get her sword ready because it's coming right for them. As the deer closes in, Rose activates his magic, hitting her with both strength and resistance boosts. Rose starts glowing with all this new energy and looks down at her hands, totally confused by the power. Rose tells her to keep it together and just stand her ground without running away, even as the flaming deer slams right into her blade with a massive amount of force. The monster gets sent flying back like a brick wall hit it, and Rose is fine. The monster gets sent flying back through the air, and Rose just stands there staring, totally stunned by what just happened. She can't believe her own eyes and asks if she really just deflected that thing all on her own. Rose pipes up to clear the confusion, telling her he actually cast some support magic on her to give her a hand. He explains that her physical strength is way higher now and her resistance to fire has been cranked up too. He tells her the power she felt is exactly how the magic works, and Rose thinks the whole thing is pretty amazing. Rose tells her she's safe to hunt monsters now, so she grips her sword and gets ready to go. She charges forward with a yell, but Rose knows that even with the buffs, her level is still low, meaning her base stats aren't great. He looks at the fire deer and realizes she's going to struggle to cut through that thick, armored skin. He points his finger toward the action, knowing that support magic is the perfect fix for this. He snaps his fingers and calls out a sharpness boost to make her blade cut through anything. Rose explains that his support magic is also effective on weapons and armor, while he goes on to say that for a weapon it specifically increases sharpness, just as Rose swings her glowing blade. She follows through on the heavy swing, and the enchanted edge pierces right through the monster's thick hide. Rose stands there breathing hard, completely wiped out from the effort of the attack. She looks down at the dead monster, barely able to process that she actually won the fight, and she shakily asks if they really just pulled that off. She stares at the beast and asks again if she really won, still looking for some kind of confirmation from her teacher that she defeated it. Rose gives her a small round of applause and tells her yeah, she really did it. He hands her a paper and tells her to check out her divine revelation, but Rose just looks confused. Rose looks over at the paper and says there's no way, while Rose just stares at it with her mouth wide open, and she's so shocked her eyes are practically popping out of her head. She starts yelling, asking if her level really went up, and she can't believe it actually jumped up by 2 levels at once. Her paper clearly shows she's now a level 5 apprentice warrior with all her stats finally moving in the right direction. She mentions how she's killed a ton of monsters before this, but her level never changed until right now. Rose reminds her that even though he helped her out with some support magic, she's the one who finished it solo. He explains that her massive boost also comes from getting the divine essence for her first big kill, but Rose just looks completely lost. She repeats the words first kill and divine essence back to him like she's never heard any of that before. Rose stops and asks her if she even knows the real reason why killing monsters makes someone stronger, and she simply says she thought God just hands out experience points after a victory. Rose explains that while experience is actually called divine essence, there's actually a lot more to it, and mentions that the final results change a lot based on who beats the monster and how they do it. He gives an example, pointing out that a fire deer is usually meant for adventurers who are level 10 or higher, but since Rose took it down solo at level 3 in just one hit, she got a massive bonus. On top of that, he says that whenever someone beats a new magical beast for the first time, they get rewarded for their guts, which results in an even bigger pile of divine essence for the adventurer. Rose looks at her paper and admits she had no clue about this first kill bonus thing at all. Rose tells her it's pretty common, as most people don't actually know how those specific mechanics work. But then he mentions his own cheer skill helped out too, leaving Rose looking totally confused. He decides it's probably better to just show her, so he calls out for a revelation and a glowing scroll appears. Rose points out a specific section on the scroll, telling Rose to look right there under the skill list, and explains that his cheer skill affects everyone nearby by giving them 5 times the normal divine essence. Rose stops him right there, looking completely stunned as she asks if that really means they get a 5 times multiplier, which Rose casually confirms while she just stands there trying to process the news. She puts the pieces together and asks if this means she can grow 5 times faster, and he tells her that's exactly it. The reality of the situation finally hits her, and she just screams out in total shock while Rose smiles. Then he gives her a wink and suggests they keep the pace up to take down even more monsters. By the time the sun starts to set, Rose is still hiding her face behind her scarf and giggling like crazy, looking at her sheet in pure disbelief, because she somehow managed to jump all the way up to level 7. She starts running around in circles, yelling about how she can't believe she gained that much power in just one day. Since they started, Rose has already managed to take down 8 magic beasts, and she's so hyped that she's spinning in circles, which is honestly pretty impressive for someone who just started out as an adventurer. Rose watches her with a smile, telling her that all this quick progress is really just a result of how hard she's been working. Rose immediately disagrees, yelling that it's actually all thanks to him, while he just thanks her for being so modest. She admits that back when she first heard he was a trainer, she figured he just knew some effective workout methods, but Rose just laughs it off, saying that there really isn't anyone else out there with a job like his after all. He explains that most people wouldn't ever expect to see someone with skills specifically designed just for training, which sends Rose back into a spinning frenzy, shouting about how his job is actually super rare and incredible. Then she stops and asks if he's actually a secret member of some top-tier, amazing party, catching him totally off guard, as she leans in even closer, wondering if a legendary group has already scouted him for his insane support skills. Rose starts thinking to herself that there's just no way a top-tier party would ever overlook a job as amazing as his, and then she gets even more excited and asks if he's actually part of the hero's party. Rose doesn't say anything for a moment, just looking down with a heavy expression. Then he finally breaks the silence, telling Rose that he isn't in any party and has zero interest in teaming up with anyone, leaving her completely stunned. He adds that a lot has happened recently and he really just wanted to keep his vocation a secret, making Rose feel terrible. She immediately apologizes, telling him she was being insensitive for prying like that, but Rose starts waving his hands around, telling her it's really nothing she needs to worry about. He explains that he just enjoys having a quiet life right now and that's why he doesn't want a team, so Rose says she gets it. The girl stays quiet for a bit, looking down at the ground while Rose watches her, admitting that he still can't help but feel bad about the situation. Rose repeats that he really doesn't mind what happened, but Rose is still blushing like crazy and trying to find the right words. She tells him that having someone as incredible as him helping her one-on-one feels like a huge deal, especially since it feels like she's just keeping him all to herself. She immediately realizes how that sounded and starts panicking, wondering what she's even saying, while she just gives him a huge, genuine smile and thanks him one more time. Rose just stands there totally stunned for a second, looking at her. Then Rose promises she'll do her absolute best even if she's a lot to handle, and says she's really excited to work with him. Rose looks at her and starts thinking to himself, wondering if he's actually happy about his real job being a trainer. He asks himself if he's finally starting to feel that way. So he just smiles and tells Rose they should both do their best tomorrow, staring up at the sky, and realizing that he's actually the one who should be thanking her. Rose notices the sun setting and tells Rose it's time to head back to town, and Rose is so hyped she can barely contain herself, shouting about how she's never been this excited for a hunt. Rose gives her a look and tells her to make sure she actually gets some sleep tonight, while secretly promising himself that he'll use every bit of his experience to make her as strong as possible. He wants to turn her into a top-tier adventurer who can join a powerful party, but Rose interrupts his thoughts by skipping up and asking what kind of skills he thinks she'll end up with. He admits he doesn't really know, so she just starts daydreaming about getting something flashy and cool. Then the next morning rolls around at the guild and Rose is already screaming an apology. She's got her hands pressed together and her head bowed, repeating over and over how sorry she is, which is a weird start to the day since Rose just showed up to meet her for their scheduled hunt. The second Rose makes eye contact with the brunette receptionist, Tara. She drops into a deep bow, and she looks pretty stressed as she asks him if it's a bit unfair for her to start with an apology. Rose calls her out for telling Rose he's a trainer, but Tara just freaks out and says she couldn't leave the kid alone. She mentions how Rose just got kicked out of her party, though she realizes Rose probably knows that, so he just gives her a tired look and confirms that the kid told him the whole story herself. Tara keeps going, talking about how Rose tried everything to get back into her old group or find a new one, but she got rejected everywhere she went and ended up crying her eyes out after every single no. Rose stares off for a second, thinking to himself that it's actually really easy to picture her doing that. Tara explains that rookie adventurers are usually so desperate to get strong and make a name for themselves that they don't have any room for others, which leads to them being pretty brutal when they reject people. Rose just sighs, realizing Tara couldn't help but step in when she saw someone in trouble, and he tells her she's honestly just as soft-hearted as she's always been. He starts laughing a bit, reminding her how much she used to look out for him back in the day, but Tara just teases him right back, saying he was the kind of guy who couldn't be left alone either. She gets a bit more serious, explaining she really wanted to help the kid out and knew Rose was the best choice, though she follows it up with an apology for not checking with him before setting the whole thing up. Tara claps her hands together like she just remembered something important, and she asks him if he still remembers that promise they made to go out for dinner together sometime. She tells Rose the meal is on her, but he just stands there looking completely caught off guard. Tara says she'll even dress up really cute for it so they can call it even, leaving Rose totally confused. Tara leans in close and teases Rose, asking if he'd actually prefer her to wear something more mature and sexy for their dinner, which sends him into a total panic as he shouts that a normal outfit is perfectly fine. Tara just laughs it off and says everything is settled now, finally able to head back to her job at the guild, while Rose stands there blushing, wondering what kind of wild outfit she was even thinking about wearing. She calls out to him one last time before she goes, and Rose jumps a bit while answering her. Tara thanks him for stepping up to help the girl like she asked, knowing her eyes didn't deceive her, but Rose is just confused, asking how she even knew he'd do it. She tells him she can tell just by looking at him and follows it up with a smirk, saying it takes a softie to recognize another softie. She points right at him and tells him he's definitely a soft-hearted guy himself. Tara waves goodbye and dashes off back to work, leaving Rose standing there by himself. The girl with the ribbon smirks and says it takes a softie to know one, which makes the red-haired girl jump and shout out for allium in total surprise. Tara gets a bit flustered and asks the girl if she was actually eavesdropping on their whole conversation, but the ribbon girl ignores the question and points out how much that young man's vibe has changed lately. She admits she used to wonder why Tara was so hung up on a guy who walked around with nothing but a fake smile on his face. And Tara just looks away with a sheepish grin, admitting that it definitely looked like that from the outside. The girl with the ribbon smiles gently and says that based on his new attitude, she's actually looking forward to seeing him grow into a fine adventurer. Tara starts to say something else about her reasons, looking back over her shoulder as she prepares to explain why she's so invested in him. Because at the end of the day, she knows the truth about who Rose is. The guy is actually a former first-class adventurer who used to be part of the hero's own party. Meanwhile, Rose walks through the streets thinking about how his power is meant to help people, before glancing at the sky and realizing it's almost time to get started. Rose walks away feeling like he really can't compete with a veteran receptionist like Tara, but something catches his eye as a weird vibe starts picking up nearby. He stops and looks over his shoulder, wondering what's up with the crowd gathering down the street, thinking maybe there's some kind of special event or a traveling merchant in town today. As he gets closer, he hears someone mention they'll see if Rose actually shows up, and then he hears a familiar voice saying she's already told them the same thing a bunch of times. Rose stops in his tracks when he hears a girl tell Rose that she's being way too persistent, and another girl chimes in, telling Rose she should just give up on being an adventurer and head back to the countryside already. Rose looks completely cornered and stressed out by the confrontation, while the people standing around start whispering, wondering if they're about to see a real fight break out between adventurers. Rose listens in as a local bystander explains that a trio of adventurers started messing with the red-haired kid, and things got heated when she tried to defend herself. The guy continues, pointing out that Rose was being singled out by the group, while one of the girls in the trio shouts that Rose should already know she doesn't have a single lick of talent. The blonde girl with braids steps forward, mocking Rose for never improving even a little bit during the long time they worked together, and the other girl in the red headband joins in, asking if she's really still shamelessly holding onto the hope of being an adventurer. Rose stands back and takes it all in, starting to realize exactly what kind of mess he's walked into. It clicks for him that these three kids are actually Rose's former party members, and they aren't being nice about the reunion. The blonde girl keeps the insults coming, telling Rose she's going to spell things out clearly for an incompetent person like her, shouting for everyone to hear that someone without talent is never going to make it to the top, no matter how hard they try. She finishes her rant by screaming that everything Rose is doing is a total waste of time because strength is the only thing that matters, leaving Rose to wonder how his new student is going to handle the pressure. The blonde girl stares Rose down with cold eyes, telling her straight up that everything she's doing is totally pointless. Rose flashes back to all the reasons she's trying so hard, from wanting to save her sick mother to the small wins of leveling up. But the blonde girl just keeps digging in, telling her to pack her bags and go back to the country to grow wheat like a peasant. She mocks Rose, saying farm work suits her way better, while the rest of the trio starts laughing at how pitiful the whole scene is. But then Rose finally steps out of the crowd and shocks everyone by telling them that Rose actually has real talent. Rose can't believe her eyes and yells his name, but Rose just gives a casual little wave and says hey to the group. He looks them in the eye and says that even if Rose is weak now, he won't stay quiet while they dismiss her hard work. Rose admits he's surprised to see her at the center of a mess like this, while Rose just looks down, feeling totally embarrassed. The blonde girl gets annoyed and demands to know who this guy even is to such a useless girl, and Rose starts to answer, saying he's Rose's. He trails off for a second, leaving everyone waiting to hear exactly what his connection to her is. Rose scratches his head and starts feeling the pressure, asking himself what exactly his connection to Rose is supposed to be. And while Rose waits for an answer with wide eyes, Rose just mumbles to himself, making the blonde girl yell out in frustration. The blonde girl laughs and says she finally gets it, claiming that Rose only came crying to Rose because no real party would give her the time of day. She keeps going, looking down on her former teammate and calling her absolutely pathetic. Then she turns her insults toward Rose, telling him he has some seriously bad taste for even thinking about teaming up with a girl like her. She even asks if the only reason he's hanging around is because he has a thing for her face. Rose stands there looking a bit surprised by the attitude and mentions that the two of them haven't even officially formed a party yet. But then he looks the blonde girl in the eye and tells her she's dead wrong, because Rose has real talent and is going to get much stronger. The blonde girl just scoffs at the idea, pointing out that Rose has been an adventurer for a whole year and is still stuck at level 3. She finishes her roast by saying Rose is basically useless since she can't use magic or skills, and her stats are the worst of the worst. The blonde girl keeps talking down to Rose, asking if he's just another talentless, third-rate adventurer since he couldn't see the truth about Rose. She smirks while saying that it finally makes sense why two people like them would end up on the same team. Then she goes even further, betting that Rose was actually kicked out of his old party for being useless, while Rose looks over at Rose. And though Rose tells them they can talk trash about her all they want, the blonde girl just gets annoyed and asks what she's even trying to do. But Rose has finally had enough. She shouts out with everything she's got, because she points her finger right at them and yells that she absolutely won't let anyone insult the person who helped her out. She stands her ground and demands an apology, leaving her former teammates completely stunned by her sudden burst of confidence. The blonde girl just mocks her with a sarcastic reply, giving her a fake "yes, sir," while her expression shifts to pure anger, asking Rose who the hell she thinks she is to start getting cocky with her. She grabs Rose by the collar and growls that she has some serious nerve talking back like that, leaving the poor girl shaking in fear. Rose is completely frozen with sweat on her face. It's clear she's freaking out after being grabbed by her collar, and an exclamation mark shows she's caught totally off guard when the blonde girl suddenly lets go and says she'll apologize to Rose, leaving Rose standing there confused and asking what she means. The girl clarifies that if Rose wants that apology, she has to prove Rose's words are actually true herself. But then she mentions something about a week from now, which makes Rose speak up and ask what she's getting at. She explains that there's a guild promotion exam coming up soon, and her group is planning on taking the rank 4 test. Looking right at her, she tells Rose that if she manages to reach rank 4 as well, she'll finally admit she was wrong and give that apology. Rose stands there thinking about how reaching rank 4 is a huge deal, basically like graduating from being a total beginner. The blonde girl stares her down and says it only counts if she actually manages to pull off the rank up, because it would be the only way to prove that Rose was actually right about her having any potential at all. It's clear that things look pretty impossible for Rose at the moment. She's stuck in a bad spot and the blonde girl isn't making it easier, telling her that if she fails the test, she has to apologize to them right in the middle of the main street. Rose is just standing there confused as the girl keeps going, saying Rose deserves this for acting tough when she doesn't actually have any talent. Rose can't even find the words to respond, while the other girls in the group start laughing and mocking her. They're already picturing her having to scream about how wrong she was. They're really leaning into the bullying. But the blonde girl gets closer, telling Rose that the only real way to prove she's got what it takes is by actually getting results during the exam. Rose is visibly sweating under the pressure and the girl keeps pushing, asking if little Rose is just too scared to even try taking the promotion test. She's trying to get under her skin and basically dares her to step up if she really wants that apology so bad. Rose is shaking and looks like she's about to break, but then Rose steps in and puts his hands on her shoulders with a big smile. He tells them he's actually down for that arrangement. Rose looks up at him totally shocked because Rose just makes it official right then and there, saying Rose is going to take that promotion exam in exactly 1 week. Everyone's jaw just drops and Rose finishes by telling the girl that when Rose hits rank 4, she'll have to admit she was wrong and give them the apology they're looking for. Rose looks completely calm as he doubles down on the bet. He says if Rose fails the promotion, they'll both give them a formal apology. The blonde girl loses it and asks if he's actually insane for thinking an incompetent person like Rose could ever hit rank 4. Rose doesn't miss a beat and says that while she isn't ready right now, it's not impossible if she gets stronger by the deadline. The girl can't believe what she's hearing and reminds him that they only have a single week left before the test starts, and Rose just looks at her with total confidence, saying that a whole week is plenty of time for what he has planned. The blonde girl just laughs it off and tells them she's looking forward to seeing the look on Rose's face when they fail the exam. She starts walking away with her group, yelling back at Rose to make sure he doesn't try to run away from their promise. The girls start heading out and talk about coming back in a week to watch the disaster. Rose calls out for them to wait a second. The girl stops and asks what he wants now, so Rose tells her that the exam isn't supposed to be some big competition between them. He finishes by genuinely wishing them good luck on their own exams, leaving the three of them totally confused by his kindness. Phrygia yells one last insult from the distance, telling them to enjoy their confidence while they still can. Rose just ignores it and suggests to Rose that they should get moving too. As they start walking through the woods, Rose looks a bit guilty and starts to apologize, telling Rose that he feels bad for agreeing to that crazy promotion bet without even asking her what she thought. Rose gets flustered and tells him not to worry about it, since she's the one who got him caught up in her drama to begin with. Rose rubs the back of his head and admits he just got heated. He realized a second too late that he totally fell for a cheap taunt. Rose clenches her fists and tells him that even if he hadn't said anything, she was about to snap and say the same thing herself. So Rose asks if those girls were really her old party members because of how intense they were. Rose looks down and confirms that they were. She explains that the blonde girl, Phrygia, is the leader of that group, and when they first started out together, everyone's skills were about the same, but Rose was the only one who couldn't seem to get any better as time went on. She admits that Phrygia definitely hated how slow she was at improving. Meanwhile, Rose just processes the fact that the girl from earlier really is the leader. Rose looks pretty down as he admits he actually got kicked out of the party after only a month, which catches Rose off guard, and she mentions that a single month is a crazy short amount of time. Rose looks away, explaining that ever since that happened, those girls have made fun of her every single time they cross paths. And Rose realizes that explains things, since he actually bumped into that same group on his way to meet up with her earlier that morning. He looks off to the side as something else clicks in his head, suddenly remembering the rumors he heard from people nearby, saying the group picked a fight with Rose and things turned into a total brawl once she talked back. Rose starts fidgeting with her fingers, looking completely embarrassed as she tries to find the right words to explain herself. And she tells him it started when the leader said there was no way Rose could ever save her cursed mother. She looks down sadly, explaining that it felt like they were insulting Rose's own power after everything he did to help her the day before, and as Rose listens, she admits she just couldn't handle the frustration of hearing them talk like that. Rose catches up to Rose and thanks her for standing up to those girls for him, and she just gives a shy response, letting him finish his thought about how happy it made him to see her get mad and force Phrygia to apologize. He adds that even if she doesn't like the girl, seeing her take a stand like that was honestly really cool, which sends Rose into a blushing mess as she huffs, saying it's only natural to get mad when someone insults her benefactor. Her face stays red, but her expression goes quiet for a second, almost like she's hesitating to bring something up, before she finally asks if she can really hit rank 4 in just 1 week like Phrygia was talking about. Rose doesn't sugarcoat it and tells her straight up that he honestly thinks it might be a little early for her, leaving her completely stunned for a second, until he follows up by saying he actually thinks this is a great chance. He explains that if she wants to reach her goal, she's going to have to deal with the promotion exam at some point, and since she caused such a scene earlier, everyone in town knows her face now, which actually works in her favor. Rose explains that plenty of people are going to be watching to see if she really gets any stronger, and if she passes this exam to prove herself, everyone will change their minds and she might even get a party invite. He keeps going, telling her that the amount of jobs she can take will go through the roof once that happens, and finally being able to afford a Cursebreaker's fee will actually become a real possibility. He tells her to just forget about that match with the other girls for now, since focusing on this is the absolute fastest way to break her mother's curse. It's going to be a tough road ahead, but he thinks it's the perfect goal for her to aim for. He looks her right in the eyes and asks her straight up if she thinks she can do it, and Rose doesn't hesitate for a second, shouting back that she definitely can. Rose tells her not to rush into things as they head deeper into the woods to start their training. Rose tells Rose to stay focused and watch her opponent's movements carefully so she can time her move perfectly. The horned rabbit lunges, and Rose yells for her to go for it right now. Rose shouts back and takes the shot, officially starting her big push for the promotion exam. 5 days pass since she started this training, and now she's facing off against a bird called an iron feather. The bird zips through the air like a bullet, but Rose keeps her eyes locked on it while it starts a high-speed dive. She knows it's coming straight for her, but she also knows the bird can't change its path once it's committed. She waits for the perfect moment to dodge and calls out that she's aiming for the landing spot, swinging her blade down with everything she's got. She's covered in sweat but doesn't let up for a second, completely focused on the fight until a voice suddenly calls her name, making Rose look up from his map to see who's there. Rose just stands there with his eyes shut, totally stunned by the news, while Rose looks like she's seen a ghost, her eyes wide and full of shock. She says there's no way this is happening, especially since the big exam is in 2 days, making her collapse onto her knees in the dirt. She asks why they can't level up anymore, and it's clear they're both starting to feel pretty desperate about the whole situation. At first, things were great because her level jumped from 3 to 7 almost instantly, but sitting in the woods, she complains that she's only gained 2 levels in 5 days. She buries her head in her knees and asks if her vocation is the real problem, leaving Rose to think that even if her class is unique, she should still be growing. He starts breaking a sweat, realizing her growth is way slower than it should be. Rose sits there looking over their progress, thinking about how they're taking down more monsters every single day while using his support skills. But the problem is that Rose hasn't leveled up once in 3 days since she hit level 9. He watches her and thinks she's honestly doing an amazing job. She listens to everything he teaches, her form is actually pretty good, and she never gives up, plus she's already cleared out way more beasts than he thought she could handle. But Rose starts to get a little nervous because her level still isn't moving at all. He breaks into a sweat, realizing this whole situation is completely unexpected. It's like she hit a massive wall right before level 10, one that's keeping her from getting any new skills or magic while her stats barely move. Her status window shows she's still just a level 9 apprentice warrior, with F-rank stats in everything. Rose looks down at the status paper, wishing she had just one usable skill or even a single high stat, because with that, he could have shown her how to take down a much wider variety of monsters. But he's totally stumped since he's never seen a vocation like this and has no clue what an apprentice warrior even is. He starts panicking, thinking her abilities might actually stay stuck at a beginner level forever because of that name. So he just sits there in silence, staring at the stats while Rose stays slumped over on the grass. He tries to tell himself that there's no way a job like that actually exists, but he can't shake the feeling that even if she keeps getting stronger and leveling up, he's basically run out of time to fix this. He looks away, wondering what's even going to happen next if she somehow hits level 10 today. It's obvious to him that Rose is hitting her absolute limit after pushing herself so hard every day, leaving Rose sitting there wondering what his next move should be while Rose finally starts to stand back up. Rose calls out to her, looking like he has something heavy on his mind, but Rose cuts him off, asking if he knows any other places where she can find new monsters to fight. Rose just stares at her, totally surprised by her energy, as she explains that she's already gone through pretty much every magical beast in this area. She suggests moving to a new spot entirely. She's hungry for those first kill bonuses and the divine essence that comes with them. Rose looks down, thinking it's cool she's still coming up with ideas even when things look bleak. But he tells her that plan just isn't going to fly, because there aren't any monsters left nearby that she can actually handle safely, and the travel time to a new zone would take way too long. Rose looks him right in the eye and asks what would happen if they fought something that wasn't safe, which leaves Rose completely speechless. But she keeps going, telling him that if he ever feels like he's in real danger, he should just leave her behind and save himself. Rose starts waving his hands around in a panic, telling her there is no way he'd ever just abandon her like that, so Rose finally backs down a bit, acknowledging that she's asking for way too much and that avoiding risks is the smarter move. Rose looks at him, acknowledging that she knows he's just worried about her safety, but she reminds him that they only met in the first place because she was willing to risk it all against that flare Bambi. She tells him straight up that she needs to keep challenging herself if she ever wants to actually get stronger. Hearing her determination makes a small smile creep onto Rose's face. Suddenly, Rose smacks his own cheeks with both hands to snap himself out of it, which totally startles Rose. He laughs it off, admitting he's the one who was lacking guts, especially since their end goal is already so reckless. He looks at her with a new sense of focus, realizing that trying to play it safe was just being naive, so he decides to listen to her and go after a completely different type of magic beast. Rose mentions he already has a target in mind, and Rose is all in, ready to get moving as they walk into the forest together. Rose asks what they're hunting, and he promises to explain everything on the way. Rose stops in her tracks as they reach the edge of the woods. She notices the colors of the forest changing and points out the leaves, while Rose asks if she realized what they signify. Rose explains that once they cross this line, they'll be in a territory where the monsters are way too strong for any normal rookie. Rose looks pretty worried, remembering how the guild gave her a strict warning to never go past these yellow leaves. Rose leans against a tree, mentioning how he used to hear constant reports of young adventurers getting wiped out in these deep woods. He says the guild's rules have helped keep people alive lately, but Rose just stands there looking completely spooked by the history of the place. She asks if their target is really waiting for them in such a dangerous area, and Rose confirms that's exactly where they're headed. He gives her a wink, promising that even in a place this scary, there are certain monsters she can handle if they play it smart. Rose gives her a thumbs up and explains that the beast they're hunting doesn't need any crazy tactics, yet it gives out a ton of divine essence. Rose is totally shocked by the news, wondering how a monster that easy and rewarding could even be real. Rose holds up a finger as he finally reveals the name of their target, the Emperor Ant. He describes it as a massive beast that stands taller than any person, which leaves Rose looking pretty confused. He asks if she even knows what a normal ant is, and she confirms she knows the little bugs, so he tells her to just imagine one of those but giant. As they walk, Rose starts scratching a diagram into the dirt with a stick, noting there are two main dangers. First, he points out the creature's massive, powerful mandibles. If she lets those jaws get a grip on her, they'll slice right through her armor. Since the rest of the body is way too tough to hit directly, he tells her to go for the joints in the neck and legs. He explains those spots are thin and soft, meaning she can actually cut through them. He thinks the neck is the best target, but crippling the legs first is the smartest way to keep the thing from moving. Rose starts rambling about the fight, telling her to watch for acid and mandibles while aiming for the leg and jaw joints all at once. It's a lot to take in. He catches himself sweating, realizing he probably talked her ear off with all that technical stuff, so he tries to simplify things. He tells her the bottom line is just to watch the monster's movements, dodge whatever it throws, and keep hitting those joints until it drops. He promises her that if she sticks to that plan and uses her support magic, she's got this win in the bag, making Rose nod along, saying she understands and is pretty sure she can pull it off. Rose sees she's still a bit unsure, so he reminds her that he's been watching her train for 5 days straight. He tells her she's definitely not weak and just needs to have some more confidence in herself, which really fires her up. She pumps her fist and says if he believes in her that much, she's going to give it everything she's got. As they keep walking through the woods, something finally clicks in her head and she speaks up. She admits the Emperor Ants sound like pretty tough magical beasts, but she's confused why everyone stayed away from them for so long. To her, they don't really sound dangerous enough to justify how much people have been avoiding them. Rose notices Rose hesitating and asks if there's some other problem on her mind, leading into him praising her for picking up on the details. He tells her it's good she noticed and that she's keeping a cool head, but now they're getting to the really important part of the mission. Rose explains that these Emperor Ants are magical beasts that live in big colonies inside caves, and then he drops the real bombshell. He says that once the fight starts, about 30 soldier ants will swarm out from all over the nest to protect the leader, which completely freaks Rose out. She yells out the number 30 in total disbelief, so Rose quickly steps in to calm her down. He tells her he's going to handle every single one of those extra ants himself so she can just focus on the Emperor Ant, making Rose lose it even more. She can't wrap her head around him fighting 30 monsters at once, and she nervously asks him if he's actually going to be okay doing that. Rose doesn't seem worried, but he does admit that even though he's making it sound easy, an Emperor Ant is usually a beast that takes a whole group of rank 3 adventurers to take down safely. Rose admits he was only hesitating because he was worried he might fail and leave Rose in a dangerous spot, but looking at her with a new look in his eyes, he says he's finally made up his mind too. He makes a huge promise to not let a single soldier ant get anywhere near her, which catches Rose totally off guard. Rose smiles and tells her that seeing how determined she is makes him feel like he's gotta give it his all too. And just as they're about to move, he stops and tells Rose there's one more thing he forgot to mention. He brings up what she said earlier about how he should just run away and leave her if things get too risky, but he gets serious and tells her that's something she should never say to him. Rose asks her how she'd feel if the roles were flipped, and he told her to just leave him behind to die, a question that totally shuts her down. He points out how she wouldn't even know what to do if that actually happened, so the two of them keep walking as he explains why she shouldn't throw around words like that so lightly. Rose keeps talking about her earlier comment, saying running away is only for when there's no other choice left. But even if a party is on the verge of being wiped out, that shouldn't be the goal because the whole point of getting stronger and preparing is to make sure things never get that desperate. He looks ahead, telling her that training is really about being able to protect the people she cares about. And as Rose listens in surprise, he adds that she'll definitely have a party of her own one day, so she needs to remember that. The two of them keep moving through the forest until Rose finally notices they're getting close to the spot. He points out a bunch of dirt balls on the ground, explaining they're just stuff dug out by soldier ants expanding their nest. Rose just stands there staring at the evidence of the monsters nearby, not saying a single word. Rose catches her expression and asks if she's getting nervous, which makes her jump and stammer out a quick yes. He tells her to trust him because she'll be fine, and though she agrees, she admits she's just been overthinking things. Rose starts thinking about what he'd actually do if Rose was in real danger and told him to just run away and save himself. He wonders how he'd handle it, questioning his own reaction if things ever got that bad. But it's not just about her, he's thinking about any future party members he might team up with down the road. He tells himself to stay calm because when the people he cares about are in a tough spot, he needs to be ready, and just like that, they reach their destination in the woods. Rose points out the massive cave entrance, telling her it's an emperor ant nest and that it's finally time for a challenge. They stand there looking at the dark opening of the nest while he confirms this is definitely the place. Before they take another step, Rose stops and calls out to her, telling her there's one thing they need to do before going in. He tells her to come over to him, and she quickly moves closer to hear what he has to say. As she asks what's going on, he just tells her to stay right there and keep still for a second. Rose activates a spell called All Vision to enhance their sight. Rose gets caught off guard by the sudden flash, and she stands there looking around completely confused while Rose looks toward the cave entrance, noticing that nothing seems different just yet. He tells her to go ahead and take a look inside the cave now. Rose looks toward the darkness, and her eyes widen as the magic finally starts working for her. She freaks out and yells that she can actually see perfectly inside the cave. Rose just stays cool, explaining that it's a basic support spell for seeing in bad conditions, and mentions that they can now explore the entire place without needing to carry torches. Rose is practically jumping for joy, making Rose wonder if this kind of magic is really that rare for her. She tells him it's a huge deal because not having to deal with flickering flames and weird shadows is a game changer, plus she's just really relieved to have both of her hands free while they're heading into the nest. Rose feels pretty good about their current spot, mentioning how they've finally got the upper hand. He points out that trying to take on a whole swarm of ants is a nightmare when you're stuck holding a torch, and adds that's exactly why these kinds of missions usually end up being such a massive pain for most people. Rose admits she's super relieved because she's honestly not that great at fighting with a torch either, but then Rose calls her name, making her jump a bit. She asks if he really said ants, and Rose confirms they're almost at the source. He tells her to keep her eyes peeled, right at the very end of the passage they're walking through. Rose explains that the path should open up into a big plaza soon, which catches Rose a bit off guard. He warns her that the monsters in there are known for ambushing any adventurers who happen to wander in, so he notes that the master of the nest, a strain ant, is probably waiting in that plaza all by itself. Rose lays out the plan, saying he'll handle all the soldier ants it calls for help so she can just focus on the boss. Rose nods, ready to go. A loud scream suddenly rings out from deeper in the cave, catching Rose and Rose totally off guard as Rose asks if that was a human voice, while Rose wonders if there's another adventurer caught in the middle of a fight. They both start sprinting toward the bright light at the end of the passage to see what's going on, but the second they reach the exit, they both freeze up in total shock, looking down into a massive underground plaza that is absolutely covered in a carpet of crawling ants. Standing tall among the thousands of smaller insects are several massive emperor ants, looming over the swarm. Rose looks pretty nervous and asks if those giant ones are the emperors he was talking about, noting that there seem to be way too many of them, but Rose doesn't answer her right away. He just stands there sweating, staring down at the horde and wondering what the hell is actually happening. Rose finally speaks up, explaining that emperor ants normally lead their own armies and never group up together. Rose suddenly grabs Rose and starts panicking, telling him to look up, but he doesn't catch on right until a massive ant monster drops from the ceiling, nearly landing on top of them as they both freak out. Looking at the thing, Rose notes it's way bigger than an emperor ant, while Rose just stands there staring at the giant creature, finally realizing they're looking at a queen ant, something Rose has never even heard of. He explains that this is the highest class of ant monster in existence, a total apex species that is basically the boss of the emperors, leading the entire army from the top. It's hard to believe a monster that dangerous would even be in a place like this. But then a loud scream cuts through the plaza. Rose realizes this training session is getting way out of hand as another cry for help echoes out, forcing Rose to snap out of it and move toward the noise. He points toward the center of the plaza, where two adventurers are trapped in the middle of a massive swarm, desperately trying to hold their ground. The leader of the trapped party yells at his team to stay focused, but one of them is already down. Things look bad since there are only 3 of them and one is badly hurt. So Rose realizes he doesn't have any time to just sit there and think. He has to act fast, leading him to turn and tell Rose to get back to the hallway where it's safe. He lets her know the training session is officially over because he's going in to help them, which catches Rose completely off guard as she starts to say she'll go with him, but stops herself mid-sentence. She goes quiet for a second, looking down as she realizes she might just get in the way. Looking back up, Rose tells him she's actually going to fall back and wait like he asked, leaving Rose thinking she's a smart kid for actually reading the room and knowing her limits. He tells her he's going to bring that party back and needs her to help the injured ones once they get there. And once everyone is back together, they're all going to get out of there in one piece. Rose gives Rose one last instruction. He tells her to scream as loud as she can if any ants show up near her, and he promises he'll come running back to help her the second he hears it, so Rose nods and tells him she understands. To get ready for the chaos, Rose casts a few boost spells on himself to crank up his strength and agility. Then he takes off like a shot, daggers drawn, and moving so fast he's just a blur, leaving Rose behind in the tunnel. He clears a massive gap in one jump, flying right over the front line of the ant swarm. It's a crazy move that lets him land right in the middle of them, immediately slicing through multiple monsters before they can even react. The ants just stand there looking completely lost. They can't even keep track of where the attacks are coming from. Rose doesn't slow down for a second, ripping through the pack with clean hits and leaving nothing but monster parts behind. Over with the trapped party, the lead guy is struggling. He's cursing out the ants for being such a pain, but then he looks out into the swarm and sees someone fighting. He can't believe it and asks if someone actually came to save them. Rose yells for everyone to stick together and regroup. He's taking charge as he shouts that he's going to carve out a path to the passageway for them. Rose tells the trapped group to hold on until he gets there, and the leader yells back that he's a lifesaver. Rose tears through an ant while Rose watches him from the tunnel entrance. She's just completely mesmerized, thinking to herself about how amazing she is while watching the fight. Rose knew she was strong, but seeing this in person is something else entirely. It's a whole different level. Rose realizes she wasn't kidding about taking on 30 ants and saving the party. It clearly wasn't just talk or overconfidence. She actually has the strength to back it all up. Rose starts blushing hard, thinking about how much she wishes she could be like her hero, but she suddenly snaps out of it, realizing she needs to stay focused and watch the ants' movements too. Rose watches from the side, totally blown away as she realizes Rose can actually pull this off. Rose gets into the zone, thinking about how it's been a minute since he's had to fight at full power like this, but it turns out he's not rusty at all. He moves through the swarm with zero hesitation, and the guy he's saving is just standing there in shock watching Rose tear through the ants like they're nothing. The bald adventurer is sweating bullets, staring at the fight and wondering who the hell this guy even is. His partner says they have no clue, but they don't have a choice except to bet everything on him right now. Rose keeps the pressure on, noticing that the ants are finally ignoring the party and focusing entirely on him. He's feeling good about the situation, realizing that at this rate, he's definitely going to save everyone, although he knows if he'd shown up even a second later, things would have ended badly for the group. He looks back and thinks that, honestly, it was Rose's own drive to save her friends that made this rescue possible. Rose charges straight into the mess, carving a path through the swarm toward the trapped guys. Rose watches from the side, realizing the ants' formation is totally falling apart now that Rose is in the middle of it. He yells out to the group that if they can just regroup, they'll actually have a chance to hold these things off. The bald adventurer sees the opening and screams for everyone to move while they can, though the younger guy is still too stunned to react. The leader keeps barking orders to hurry up, but the younger kid is struggling to keep up with how fast things are moving. Just as they try to make a break for it, another giant ant lunges out of the dark, catching the bald guy completely off guard. Rose sees the danger and groans as he forces himself to move even faster than before, because he barely manages to tackle the guy out of the way before the ant's jaws can snap shut on him. It's a crazy close call, and for a split second, Rose is staring right into the bug's massive eyes. But then he throws a heavy kick that sends the giant ant flying back, keeping his grip on the adventurer the whole time. A massive explosion rocks the cave, and the bald adventurer has to brace himself while holding onto Rose so they don't get tossed. Rose takes the brunt of the shockwave, looking completely stunned as the force of the blast leaves him breathless, and Rose Vermilion watches the whole thing from a distance, covering her mouth in total horror at the destruction because she's pinned against the wall. Shaking and unable to even understand how things went south so fast, the armored guy groans as he hits the ground but immediately looks over to see Rose lying face down and motionless, asking if he's all right. Rose can barely talk. He tries to apologize for being in such a rush. but his voice is weak and trailing off while he stays collapsed on the floor, realizing that the situation is getting way more dangerous than he expected. He looks down at his hand and sees it's covered in blood, and suddenly his head starts spinning as the voices around him fade. He tries to wrap his head around how bad the injury actually is, thinking he must have hit his head pretty hard during the fall. The other adventurer tries to help him up, but even though Rose is telling himself to just stand back up, his body just won't move. Rose is in a complete daze, blood pouring down the side of his face as he barely makes a sound. He says he just can't take any more while the ants crawl all over him, but the armored guy yells at him to stay with it. The guy begs him to pull himself together, though Rose is still pinned to the floor, face down and bleeding. Rose thinks about how this is the absolute worst situation, never imagining that things would actually go south like this. He sees the ants closing in and realizes his friends are just as hurt as he is, making it feel like there's no hope left. He hits the ground in frustration, thinking that if he only had more power, he could have stopped this mess from happening. Suddenly, he hears someone calling his name from the distance, and his eyes shoot open as he recognizes it's Rose's voice and the sound of her running. He starts panicking, wondering if she's really heading straight toward him. Rose Vermilion comes charging in while screaming for him, and seeing her makes Rose realize he's still got work to do. So he asks himself if he can even speak, telling himself that he's got to find his voice and make it work no matter what. Rose is pinned to the ground, reaching out and yelling for Rose to stay back so she doesn't get caught in the mess. He keeps screaming for her to run away, but Rose just stands there with this totally blank, shocked look on her face. Rose tells her she has to leave them all behind and just go, even though she knows that's the one thing he should never say. He warns her that the ants are already heading straight for her and she needs to hurry up, but she's still just frozen. Rose shouts her name one more time, thinking they've finally hit the point where there's nothing left they can actually do. He yells at the top of his lungs, reminding her that she's supposed to be the one who saves her mom. Rose just stands there in complete silence, looking totally overwhelmed by everything happening around her. Rose's voice keeps ringing out, telling her to run for her mother's sake while the ants continue to swarm the injured group. She tries to find the words to respond, but she's shaking and can't seem to get anything out besides a few stammers. Kostoma asks if she's even able to fight, and Rose can only admit that he's just a low-rank rookie who's completely stuck. Rose is still pinned down and bleeding, but he begs Rose to listen, telling her she's smart enough to see this is a losing battle. Kostoma chimes in, yelling at the top of his lungs for her to get back to the guild and report the situation. He screams that she needs to tell them a queen ant has shown up, which leaves Rose completely stunned by the news. Kostoma keeps shouting, telling her they need reinforcements, specifically rank 2 adventurers or higher, or else they're all going to be wiped out right here. Kostoma promises he can hold them off for a little while and will definitely keep Rose safe, but Rose just looks at him in shock. He pleads with her, saying she's the only one who can make it out, and finally she gets it. She takes off running, yelling back that she'll definitely be coming back for them. The rest of the party tries to hold the line, with Kostoma shouting that he's counting on her while Rose disappears into the darkness of the tunnel, headed for the exit as the monsters close in behind her. Rose watches Rose run off into the tunnel. His eyes stay locked on her as she disappears, and Kostoma and the other guy watch her go too. The guy thanks her for going to get help while Kostoma just tells him not to worry about it. He's focused on the fight ahead, but the other guy looks pretty rough. He admits he never wanted to cause this much trouble for everyone. Kostoma tells Rose to just stay put and that he'll protect him until the very end. Rose gives a weak laugh, telling Kostoma he's counting on him, though deep down, he's thinking about how he won't be able to keep his promise to Rose. He feels terrible about it, thinking about all the pain he's put her through, but then he stops himself. He knows that apologizing is the one thing he's never supposed to do, yet he can't help but feel like a total loser. He talked a big game and now he's just face down in the dirt, barely able to move. He just whispers her name one more time as the situation gets even worse. The red-haired girl sprints out of the dark cave, breathing heavy and feeling terrible about leaving them behind. She makes it outside and tells herself she's finally clear, so now she just needs to rush back to town, but then she stops. She looks out at the trees and the long path ahead, staying quiet as reality starts to sink in. She tells herself to wait a second, suddenly realizing just how many hours it took her to get to this cave in the first place. She starts doing the math. If she goes all the way back to town, gets help from the guild, and then returns, it's going to take way too long. She wonders what could happen to Rose and the others while she's busy traveling. She drops to her knees as the truth hits her. It was all a lie. They only told her those things to make sure she escaped. She feels like an idiot, thinking that if she had just stopped to think for a second, she should have known better. She covers her face, telling herself she has to turn back right now because leaving things like this is just wrong. She knows she might not be strong enough to save Rose, and Rose doesn't even want her there, but she can't just let them die. Rose Vermilion collapses to her knees, crying as she realizes she can't save her mother alone, and even if she somehow could, it wouldn't feel right. She snaps out of it and rushes home, slamming the door open while calling out for her mother, who looks up from her bed in shock as Rose Vermilion yells that she found a curse breaker and that everything is going to be fine now. Her mother is confused though, asking how a young adventurer like her could have ever raised that much money. So Rose Vermilion puts on a brave face and lies, claiming she's gotten way stronger and has been grinding quests non-stop. Her mother smiles, mentioning that a very kind person named Rose has actually been the one taking care of her lately, and as she asks where that person is so she can thank them. Rose Vermilion completely freezes up, trying to force the words out. But her voice fails her as she thinks about what she left behind, the horrific truth finally sinking in that her teacher sacrificed herself just to make sure she could escape that monster. She starts shaking, telling herself over and over that this is all wrong and she can't let it end like this. Rose Vermilion drops to the floor, screaming that this isn't the kind of future she ever wanted for herself. But deep down, she admits she's known the truth about her situation this whole time. It's the same answer to a question she asked herself a long time ago, back when she wondered what she'd actually do if Rose was ever in real danger and told her to run. But now it's obvious. She's going to break through this entire mess and save her teacher no matter what. Rose Vermilion wants to step up and handle things just like Rose did for her just a moment ago, thinking about how anyone would feel the same way, wanting to show up and save a friend when they're in trouble. She's always dreamed of being the type of hero-like adventurer who can actually protect people. And even though she starts to doubt if someone as weak as her can really do it, she stops, completely surprised when she looks up and sees Rose standing right there in front of her. She realizes she's right, and since this is no time to be sitting around crying, she stands her ground and gets ready because the fight is getting pretty bad. A sword even snaps right in half. Kostoma freaks out saying his sword just broke, but as he struggles, Rose tells him to use his head or his shoulders. He says he's strong enough to just bash those soldier ants with his armor, but when Rose asks about the Emperor, someone says it's impossible. He feels his bleeding starting to stop, but even though his head is finally clearing up, his body just won't move. Looking over at his student, Rose says he's sorry for dragging her into all of this, but Rose shuts him down immediately, telling him that's not it at all. Rose looks down at the ground, blood dripping from his face, as he beats himself up thinking about how he should have been the one protecting them, and how this whole mess is his responsibility. But just then, a loud yell rips through the cave. Rose is charging back into the mess with everything she's got. She sprints right past the struggling knights and straight toward the wall of ants, moving so fast she's basically a blur, and seeing her jump back and makes Rose completely lose it, yelling her name in total shock while the other knight screams for the little lady to stop. The guys in the back are totally confused, wondering if she's the backup they needed, but they realize there's no way help could have gotten there that fast, and Rose just stands there looking terrified, listening to the frantic noise around him while he watches his student head into a suicide mission. Rose isn't listening to any of them though, she's just repeating her teacher's words over and over, telling herself to watch the movements and dodge, which leads her to the next step of the plan. She focuses in, telling herself to aim specifically for the joints to take them down, so she keeps dancing around the monsters, staying focused on her timing and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She finds her opening and swings with everything she has, shouting out that she's going for the joints to end this. Rose just stands there completely stunned, his own words about watching closely and dodging playing on a loop in his head. He can't believe what he's seeing and screams out to Rose, asking her why she would even think about coming back to this mess. But Rose isn't backing down at all. She yells back that her teacher was the one who told her to watch the movements and hit the joints. And as the ants swarm her, she tells herself that if she can just stick to those two simple rules, she can actually win this thing. Rose watches from the ground, thinking to himself that his advice only works when he's providing support magic. He starts to say something else, but Rose cuts him off by yelling that she absolutely refuses to let anyone be a sacrifice for her sake. She keeps going, shouting that even if she saved her mother by letting her teacher die, her mom wouldn't be happy with that at all, and most importantly, Rose says she wouldn't be happy with it either, her eyes showing she's totally serious about this. She swings her sword with everything she's got, declaring that she aims to be exactly like the person her teacher was earlier, because she's decided to be the kind of adventurer who helps people in need, no matter how dangerous it gets. Rose just lies there on the ground, watching her and whispering her name. He's totally floored by how she's handling herself. One of the other knights sees her and asks if she's really a rookie, since she's moving like a pro. Kostoma yells out that they can't let her outshine them, calling her a total hero. Meanwhile, Rose is desperately trying to force his body to move. He tells himself he just needs to cast one bit of support magic, but Rose's focus is entirely on the enemies in front of her. Her eyes are locked in on the target, but she's so busy cutting down the small fries that she doesn't see the massive monster rising up right behind her. Rose catches a glimpse of the giant ant and his face goes pale. He realizes she's in huge trouble and screams at the top of his lungs, telling Rose that an emperor ant is coming up from behind. Rose looks back and sees it, but she's frozen. Rose keeps yelling, warning her that those jaws are incredibly powerful, and if she lets it get a hold of her, it'll slice right through her armor like it isn't even there. The emperor ant opens its massive jaws, looking like it's about to snap her in half right then and there. Rose watches in a panic, thinking about how he wishes he could just aim a spell at its neck, and Rose catches his voice, her eyes snapping wide as she focuses on that one weak spot. She hears him shout about the neck and reacts instantly, letting out a panicked yell as she throws her weight into a desperate swing. She screams at the top of her lungs, putting everything she's got into this one move while bringing her blade high over her head for a massive overhead strike. The monster is right on top of her, but she beats it to the punch. The blade smashes right into the creature's face with enough force to split the entire emperor ant clean in half. The giant monster falls apart behind her while she stands there, and Rose just tries to catch her breath. She's completely wiped out, huffing and puffing after using that much power, leaving Rose just staring at her in total shock. One of the knights nearby loses it, yelling about how a rookie actually took down an emperor. Rose tries to stay calm, but Rose warns her that the fight isn't over just yet. She looks at him, nervously asking if he's sure they're still okay, and right then something shifts inside her. She freezes as a weird feeling hits. The knights nearby freak out, wondering what's happening as Rose starts to glow. Rose watches her, and Rose lets out a yell as the power becomes too much to hold back, so the light around her just keeps getting stronger. Rose can't believe how bright she's glowing. A massive pillar of energy shoots up, completely hiding her from view. It's so bright that the knights have to shield their eyes, totally lost on what's happening. Even the ant monsters stop in their tracks, looking pretty confused by the whole thing. As the light fades, Rose stands there with steam rising off her. The blinding light finally dies down, and one of the knights notices it's gone while his buddy asks him what that crazy energy was just now. Rose looks completely stunned, admitting that even he has no clue what that power was or where it came from. Rose stares at her own hands, feeling totally lost and trying to figure out what she just did. Right then, one of the ant monsters lets out a sharp, ear-piercing screech, and the massive queen ant shows up, towering over Rose and making all the other soldier ants look like tiny bugs. Rose just stands there frozen, staring up at the giant monster as it looms over her. The knights nearby start to lose it, grunting in fear as they realize they're face-to-face with a queen ant. The monster makes a clicking sound, showing off its terrifying mandibles, and suddenly the whole nest starts going crazy with screeching and cracking noises. Moving on, one of the knights yells out that things are looking really bad, while Iris just stands there looking completely stressed. Iris looks like she's about to lose it from the noise, while one of the knights wonders if the queen just lit a fire under the monster's asses. They're all still reeling from that sound they heard, and Rose just stays on the ground looking totally shocked. Rose realizes that the sound wasn't just noise. It was the specific command an emperor ant uses to make the entire soldier swarm charge. The narrator explains that this is basically the worst-case scenario, and the knights start screaming as the massive pile of ants starts rushing toward them like a wave. Rose watches from behind as the front line of the swarm suddenly gets blown away and scattered. The knights and Iris just stand there with their mouths open, having no idea what's actually happening. Rose blurs past them like a streak of light, slicing through the ants so fast they don't even have time to react. Rose just stares at the scene, completely stunned by the sheer speed and power coming from her. Rose stands there with her sword drawn, surrounded by a pile of dead monsters she just wrecked. The heavy impact of her final strike echoes through the area, leaving the room silent as Rose watches her, wondering if Rose has finally tapped into her true potential. Rose looks down at the ground, feeling like something inside her has shifted. She even starts wondering if something is actually wrong with her because she should be totally exhausted by now, but instead, her whole body feels light as a feather. She keeps a tight grip on her sword, realizing that it's actually the opposite of being tired. She feels like she's completely overflowing with power, but as the massive swarm of ants stares her down, she worries for a second. She wonders if her senses are just numb from being scared or if this is all just a delusion. But then she decides that even if it is, she's just going to roll with it, leaning forward and getting back into her fighting stance. Dead monsters are already scattered behind her, and then everything just explodes. A massive shockwave sends ants flying in every direction as the knights watch from below, completely speechless. Rose gets a small smile on her face, thinking about how great it would be if she could always protect everyone like this, while Kostoma is totally losing his mind. He's sweating and asking anyone who will listen what the hell just happened. The knights and Iris are just stunned, realizing that almost every single emperor and soldier ant was wiped out in a literal instant. Rose stands there in the middle of the dust, looking back at the wreckage she just made. She can't even believe it, asking herself if this is actually real, and if she really was the one who did all that. Suddenly, the massive queen ant screeches right in her face, still standing despite the blast. Rose looks at the monster and realizes that everything she's feeling isn't just a lie or some weird dream. She grips her sword tight, feeling all this power still surging through her. And as she watches the queen ant, she notices that the giant monster's movements actually look slow to her. She figures if she's this much faster, she's got this, so she drops into a low fighting stance ready to finish it. Watching from the ground, Rose Fleur thinks about how his God's Eye skill works, and how it lets him see that she can now perceive the divine revelations of everyone around her, and that's exactly how he knows she's ready. The queen ant swings wide, but Rose is already moving in for the kill. As Rose moves in, it raises the question of how she actually managed to take down all those ants, especially since her growth always seemed so much slower than everyone else's. Even her job title was just Apprentice Warrior, which is super weird for someone with this much power, but she just leaps up and cuts the queen ant down in a single hit. The guys watching can't even believe what they're seeing, but Rose Fleur just watches, thinking he finally gets why things turned out this way. Rose stands there victorious, having finished the job completely on her own. Seeing that she's safe, Rose Fleur feels like his work is finally done. He hits the ground hard while Rose screams out for him, but it's too late to stay awake and his consciousness just completely fades out. Rose Fleur finally opens his eyes, looking pretty dazed as he starts to wake up. He sits up in bed and looks around, confused at first until he realizes he's actually back at his house. Right then, Rose Vermilion bursts into the room, looking totally worried as she asks if he's finally awake. She rushes over to his side, asking if he's in pain, while Rose Fleur touches the bandage on his head and remembers passing out. Suddenly, a thought hits him and his eyes go wide as he bolts upright in bed. He starts panicking, asking her exactly how long he's been out for, and immediately starts worrying about the date, asking if they missed the exam today. Rose tells him to just take it easy, explaining that it's still the same night they went to the cave, so he hasn't been out that long. She mentions it's only been about 3 or 4 hours since he collapsed. Hearing that makes Rose Fleur let out a big sigh of relief, glad that they didn't miss their chance. Rose Fleur starts wondering how he actually got home, asking Rose if she was the one who carried him all that way. Rose looks pretty nervous and starts sweating, sounding like she's not quite sure how to explain what really happened back in the cave. Rose Fleur was face down on the ground while Costoma and Rose were both freaking out, yelling for him to wake up. Glycine steps in with a torch, telling Rose she really shouldn't be shaking someone who's unconscious like that. Rose is caught off guard, especially since they were all just talking normally a few minutes before everything went sideways. Glycine checks him over and tells Rose that the bleeding stopped and his breathing is totally fine, which makes Rose blush like crazy when Glycine mentions that he probably just passed out from the relief of seeing that Rose was safe. Even though he seems okay for now, Glycine points out they still need to get a doctor to check him out properly. So Costoma steps up and offers to carry him back to town on his shoulders, but right as he reaches down, Rose moves in fast. She isn't letting anyone else touch him and jumps in to take over. Rose is getting really emotional and yells out that she's the one who's going to carry him. The poor girl is basically crying her eyes out because she feels like it's her fault he's in this state. Costoma tries to say something, but Rose Fleur just looks super awkward. He points out that even if she wants to help, carrying him might be a bit much. Glycine steps in to try and keep everyone calm, mentioning that she can clearly tell Rose Fleur is someone very important to her. But then Glycine drops a bomb by calling him her boyfriend, which leaves Rose looking totally stunned and just repeating the word back like she can't believe it. Glycine keeps going with it, saying that having a cute girlfriend like Rose carry him on her back would just be a lot for any guy. Rose's face is basically on fire at this point, while she keeps obsessing over the fact that they called her a cute girlfriend. Rose Fleur finally finds his voice and tries to set the record straight, telling the group that he and Rose aren't actually in that kind of relationship. He's looking pretty stressed out now and tells them all to stop making things way more complicated than they actually are. Costoma just laughs it off and says since Rose Fleur saved his life, he wants to at least do this much to help out, and Rose Fleur finally gives in. Rose is still standing there completely frozen. Her face is bright red, and she can't even get a single word out after what Glycine said. Once things settle down a bit, Rose explains to Rose Fleur that one of the adventurers was the one who carried him back, and Rose Fleur immediately realizes who she's talking about, shouting out that he knows exactly which guys she means. He remembers the embarrassing sight of Rose trying to haul him around while he was passed out. It makes him feel like he doesn't look like much of a leader. Rose goes on to say that they happened to run into Terra right near the guild, and she makes it clear that Terra was the one who really stepped up to help them. Apparently, he was super professional about the whole thing. He called for a doctor and gave everyone clear instructions on what to do. Hearing all that, Rose Fleur can't help but think that Terra is just as impressive as he thought he would be. Rose then tells him the doctor said the bleeding looked worse than it actually was, and that he's mostly just dealing with a concussion. Rose Fleur just sighs, feeling pretty lame since he was the one who was supposed to be helping everyone else out. Rose Fleur looks down, feeling pretty guilty about everything. He says he's sorry for causing so much trouble and having to lean on everyone like that, but Rose isn't having any of it. She stands up fast and tells him that's not true at all, and she makes it clear that all the adventurers were actually really grateful for what he did. Rose keeps going, telling him she was watching the whole time and thought he was totally amazing, leading into her admitting that he's the kind of person she really wants to be like one day. Rose Fleur just looks at her with a soft smile. He thanks her and says she's actually the one who saved him, which sends Rose into a total panic. She gets all flustered and tries to brush it off, but then she suddenly remembers something big. She shouts out that there's something seriously weird happening with her body, explaining that back then, she felt this insane power surge through her, all her tiredness just vanished, and she felt lighter than ever. She says the ants started moving in slow motion, and the moment she felt like she could take them down, she actually did. Rose mentions that despite all that crazy fighting they just went through, she doesn't feel tired at all. Rose Fleur just stares at her silently, and he asks her if she still hasn't checked her revelation yet. Rose lets out a huge shout because she's so shocked and she panics, yelling that checking it totally slipped her mind. Rose Fleur can only watch as she freaks out, but he just laughs it off and says he's a total mess for not bringing it up sooner. Meanwhile, Rose is in the back looking pretty annoyed with herself. He offers to explain exactly what's happening with her, and just like that, the scene shifts over to the day of the big promotion exam. There's a massive crowd gathered outside the stone walls, and everyone is hanging out at the training grounds in the town's West District. The place is packed with people, and all kinds of adventurers have gathered to see what happened. It's a pretty big deal, so there are tons of spectators watching too. One of the guys in the crowd asks how things are looking over on their side, leading to Rose Fleur telling Rose that they've finally reached the exam venue. She just stands there looking completely overwhelmed by the whole scene. Rose Fleur looks over and asks Rose if she's getting nervous about the exam, and she says it's only natural since she heard a ton of people are failing the mid-tier lately. She's worried that failing might cause trouble for him, but he tells her it's fine just as a voice calls out to them. Dahlia and her crew show up, noticing Rose Fleur finally looks healthy again, which makes him feel a bit awkward as he apologizes for needing to be carried the other day. Costoma stops him right there, saying that he's actually the one who was saved back then. He mentions that he already told Rose how he felt, but he wants to make sure Rose Fleur knows they'd be dead without him, giving him a huge thank you while the rest of the group joins in on the praise. Rose Fleur just gets all flustered and tries to act like it was no big deal. After the quick chat, Costoma tells them they're done for the day and starts heading out. The veteran adventurer looks at Rose and tells her he really hopes she manages to break her mother's curse. Rose and Rose are both caught off guard, wondering if the group really walked all the way over just to say something like that. Costoma just shrugs it off, mentioning that in their line of work you've got to say thanks while you're still around to say it. As the group starts to head out, Rose speaks up and asks if they're going to stay around to watch her take the exam. Costoma just waves her off without looking back, saying he doesn't even need to watch it to know how it's going to go. The rest of the party joins in, giving her a peace sign and telling her she's already got this in the bag, so she should just relax and get through it. Rose watches them go and notes that they were actually pretty good party members after all. Rose just smiles, feeling good that he was able to help them out. She gets all excited and tells him they actually talked her ear off about all kinds of different things on the way back. Rose finds it funny how they were so confident they didn't even need to watch the exam to know she'd pass, and Rose just laughs a bit awkwardly, until a voice from behind interrupts them. A girl stands there and notes that Rose actually had the guts to show up. Rose freezes up and yells out Phrygia's name, seeing her former party leader standing there with the rest of the group looking smug. Phrygia doesn't waste any time, telling Rose she was sure she'd just run away. She laughs and says Rose was probably just too scared of losing the match, so she leans in close with a nasty smirk. Phrygia tells her she really doesn't know her place, and Rose just stands there with her eyes shadowed, taking the heat while she keeps her cool. But then she looks Phrygia right in the face. She stands her ground and says she isn't running away anymore. Phrygia looks surprised as Rose stares her down, telling her she's going to show everyone what she's got. With a confident smile, she declares that the version of her Phrygia knew was right about her potential, and Phrygia just loses it, laughing in her face. She tells Rose that the stuff coming out of her mouth is total nonsense. Before things can get any more heated, Rose pipes up to change the subject. He tells the girls to look over at the crowd because everyone is starting to gather around. It looks like the proctor finally showed up to get things started, so Rose tenses up and gets ready. She knows this is it, the moment she finally proves herself to everyone watching. The big moment finally arrives as the announcement hits the air. The Grade 4 promotion exam is officially starting right now. A huge crowd of adventurers gathers in the open training grounds, waiting to see what kind of crazy test is coming their way. A girl with a large ribbon steps forward to lead the group. She tells everyone her name is Allium and she's the one running the show today. She doesn't waste any time getting to the point, explaining that the test is going to be a mock subjugation using her special powers. So everyone in the crowd starts looking at each other, feeling a bit confused about what a mock subjugation even means. Rose watches her closely and thinks to himself that this is a pretty weird way to do an exam. Then he realizes she's about to use a summon. Just then, a massive deer covered in flames appears out of nowhere, and someone in the crowd yells out that it's a flare Bambi. The adventurers are definitely feeling the heat from the fire deer, but Allium just keeps talking. She says she knows some of them had a rough time with the previous task. She stands right next to the beast and explains that her magic lets her summon and control all kinds of magical creatures like this. Then she drops the real news. She tells the group that for this part of the exam, they're going to have to actually fight the beast she just brought out. The crowd listens close as Allium lays out the ground rules. Everyone has exactly 10 minutes to take down the beast alone inside the fence if they want to pass. She doesn't sugarcoat it either, letting the group know this creature is just as tough as any monster a rank 4 adventurer would have to handle. Rose takes it all in, nodding to himself as he realizes what they're up against. He thinks it's actually a pretty fair way to run an exam, assuming she can keep the power levels balanced with her summons. While the rest of the candidates listen to the warnings, they can fight however they want, but running away or trying to cheat is an automatic fail. Allium gets serious for a second, reminding everyone that she has total control over how the beasts move. But she makes it very clear that if anyone gets hurt during the fight, the guild isn't taking the blame for any accidents. Since this isn't the only time they can take the test, she tells them there's no shame in walking away if it looks like too much. Then she decides it's time to stop talking and finally show them what they'll be fighting today. With a quick motion, she calls out her summon, and a massive beast known as the Taojiu appears right behind her. Allium points to the massive creature behind her, telling the crowd that this is the opponent they'll be facing. The Taojiu lets out a heavy snort as the candidates start to freak out about how huge it actually is. She doesn't waste any time, telling everyone to start filing into the 4 enclosures in the order of their application numbers. So as the crowd begins to move, Rose turns to his student and asks what her number was again. Rose tells him she's number 45. Looking at the long line of adventurers, Rose wonders if they're going to be stuck waiting until the very end of the day. And Rose reminds him that it's their own fault since they waited until the last possible second to turn in their applications. Nearby, the other candidates are starting to lose their nerve. One girl wonders if they can even hurt something that big, while another guy admits the whole thing is getting pretty scary. Someone else in the crowd snaps at them, telling the group to stop getting cold feet before the fight even starts. One guy with spiky hair tries to figure out the gimmick, asking if the name Transparent Bull means the thing is going to turn invisible during the match. He follows up by asking if the real test is whether they can track its presence or sense where it's hiding. He grins toward the proctor, telling Allium she's being surprisingly nice for giving them a hint like that before the exam begins. Rose nods along, telling the others that the theory about the bull's name is exactly right, which makes Allium raise her hand to start the show. She calls out for the transparent bulls to be summoned, and just like that, 4 massive beasts show up in the enclosures. Watching her work, Rose is actually pretty impressed. Managing 4 beasts at once while keeping their power levels perfectly balanced is a huge feat, leading him to realize that Allium wasn't always just a guild worker. He figures she must have been a top-tier adventurer before she ever took this job. Allium doesn't let the tension drop for a second, shouting out for the exam to finally begin. In one of the pens, a candidate gets caught off guard as the bull charges. He can't even keep track of it, thinking the beast just disappeared into thin air. The guy tries to keep his cool, telling himself it's fine as long as the thing doesn't hide its presence, so he gets into a stance to catch it. But it's no use. He starts spinning around in circles, completely losing sight of the monster and panicking as he asks where it went. Just then, the bull reappears right behind his back. The guy's face goes pale when he realizes he's completely open, and the only thing he can do is let out a terrified scream as the massive creature bears down on him. The first candidate loses his cool and just bolts across the field, running for his life and getting disqualified on the spot. He ends up on his knees, totally depressed about being a coward, while Rose Vermilion feels bad for the guy. Rose tries to look on the bright side, saying the dude would at least be a good mood maker for any party because he's so fast. Next up, a knight in a horned helmet steps into the ring. He listens to the invisible movement, thinking he's finally figured out a way to win. He decides that even if he can't see the bulls, he can just create a danger zone by swinging his blade in big circles, which he keeps up, confident that the monsters have to get close eventually if they want to attack him. Watching from the sidelines, Rose admits that's one way to handle it, but he knows there's a big problem with that plan. The knight's eyes go wide when he actually makes contact. He realizes his sword won't even scratch the beast, and Rose explains that a plan like that only works if you're strong enough to cut through skin that's way tougher than a normal monster. The bull doesn't even feel the hit. It just slams into the knight and sends him flying right out of the arena for another disqualification. Another girl loses her nerve and just gives up right there crying and saying she's sorry because she can't do it, so the proctors disqualify her on the spot. After that, it's just a total mess with more and more people getting kicked out, even some guy in the back saying the whole test is just impossible. Rose Vermilion starts wondering if 4th rank stuff is always this crazy, but Phrygia just smirks and says she can't even stand to watch the losers anymore. It's finally her turn to step up, and she knows if she can't see or sense where the bulls are, she's got to change the game, so she starts pouring stuff on the dirt, saying they just have to make the invisible things visible. She kneels down and uses her power to make all these little mounds of earth pop up, which leaves Rose wondering what the point of the dirt is, until Rose Vermilion points out that Phrygia is actually an alchemist. Phrygia explains that her style is all about making tools by changing materials around, filling the whole floor with those earth bumps. And Rose realizes she's actually pretty smart. He sees the bumps are designed to collapse when stepped on, which is a perfect way to trap something you can't see, so as soon as one of the bulls trips up, Phrygia pulls back her bow with a smirk and says she's finally got it. Phrygia screams out her spell name, the ground rips open, sending a massive wooden spike flying up to impale the bull, and she drops to her knees, completely spent. The proctors yell out that she's officially passed every single part of the exam, which actually impresses Rose. He smiles and admits that the girls weren't just talking a big game after all, confirming they really did make the cut. The rest of the party starts jumping around and celebrating their win, while the people watching from the sidelines start losing it. They can't believe how fast it all went, saying it barely took a minute, just like the girl who went before them. And some guy in the crowd realizes he knows exactly who they are, telling everyone that all these kids are actually in the same party together. Rose starts asking if it's true that he was only as strong as Rose Vermilion was a month ago, which makes her turn bright red and get all flustered. Phrygia walks up right then, looking pretty annoyed as she asks what the two of them are doing flirting in public like it's nothing. The other girls in the group say hi to Phrygia while Rose keeps it chill, telling the whole squad they did a great job on passing the test. Phrygia just looks away with a smirk, saying that he's acting all composed as usual despite the big win. Phrygia asks Rose if he was even paying attention, reminding him that even level 10 adventurers can't handle a beast like that. Rose just stands there looking completely shocked as the monster charges past. Phrygia looks over and wonders out loud if a level 3 first year like little Rose could ever actually beat a monster on that level. Rose doesn't back down though, telling the group that she won't really know for sure until she gives it a shot. But the red-haired girl from the old party just shrugs and warns her that crying about it won't help once she's ended up seriously hurt. The short-haired girl joins in too, saying they're all tired of waiting around and that Rose should just quit while she's ahead, especially since Rose points out that if she leaves now, the examiner could actually finish up the work early and get some rest. Allium just smirks at the idea, saying that if Rose is really determined to go through with it, she's fine with letting it happen. Phrygia says she's going to enjoy watching Rose get wrecked out there, and the rest of the girls start laughing like it's the funniest thing ever right as the announcement calls for number 45 to step up for the final slot of the exam. Rose lets Rose know it's finally her turn and heads out to the arena while he stays behind to wish her luck. Phrygia tells Rose to do her best to embarrass herself in front of everyone, while the short-haired girl mocks her by calling her a crybaby. Rose stands there sweating, thinking about how these girls have talent but are just the worst, wondering how they can even act like this. Phrygia looks at Rose and calls him a total idiot, but he just tries to stay calm since it's finally his turn to deal with their talking. Phrygia asks if he really came all this way just to watch a failure humiliate herself, telling him he's a pervert if that's his goal. Rose ignores the insult, thinking to himself that he really just wants to be left alone so he can cheer for Rose in peace. But the red-haired girl jumps in to mess with him too, asking if Rose's face is really that much his type. She doesn't stop there and asks if he's actually just after her body, while the girl next to her starts laughing at the idea. Rose keeps his back to them and doesn't say a word, just letting the insults fly while he focuses on the arena. But Phrygia keeps pushing, asking if the two of them are actually in some kind of secret relationship. The girls keep laughing, saying he might have more talent for that than being an adventurer, but Rose just stays completely silent.